We are now streaming. 1 minute till broadcast. 30 seconds till title sequence.
Not quite at the 1 o'clock hour. Good afternoon. It is the 1 o'clock hour on Thursday, March the 9th, 2023. We are here in City Hall chambers on our first floor of our City Hall here in the city of Durham, North Carolina. Louis City strong. We are prepared to call this meeting to, we are calling this meeting to order, and we will now have our roll call.
Mayor O'Neill.
I'm present.
Mayor Pro Tem Middleton.
I'm here.
Councilmember Caballero.
Here.
Councilmember Freeman.
Present.
Councilmember Halsey-Hyman.
Present.
Councilmember Johnson has an excused absence, and Councilmember Williams.
I am here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. At this time, we'll turn our attention to our city manager to see if she has any priority items for us this afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, members of the Durham City Council. I do not have any priority items this afternoon.
Thank you, City Manager Page. We now turn our attention to Attorney Kim Rayburg, our City Attorney.
Good afternoon, Mayor O'Neill, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council. The City Attorney's Office also has no priority items today.
Okay, great, thank you so much. We turn our attention now to our clerk, Donna Schreiber, to see if she has any priority items this afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. The city clerk's office has no items today.
All right, thank you so much. We will now move to read our agenda into the record. We'll also read the entire agenda, which includes our departmental items and our presentations and our public hearing. Oh, that's right, I'm sorry. Do y'all have any announcements of council? Councilwoman Caballero, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good afternoon, everyone. Good to see you. Really quickly, I was asked to bring a resolution in support of protected status for Guatemalans, and so temporary protected status for Guatemalans. And so just looking to get consensus around bringing a resolution forward.
Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs up. Let us see your thumbs.
Thank you.
Yeah, thumbs up. Any other announcements of my colleagues to my right?
Councilmember Freeman had a question for me, and I wanted to be able to answer it in front of everyone, just so that folks understand. Historically, the U.S. has extended this protected status to countries that have faced challenging circumstances, either because of warfare or ecological or economic instances. El Salvador has been a recipient of it. I'm pretty sure Haiti has as well. And so this is just to support. There's a national campaign to extend that to Guatemalans.
Thumbs up. All right. I'll turn to my left to see if any, Dr. Halsey-Hyman.
Yes, good afternoon, Mayor and my colleagues. I just wanted to say I had the honor yesterday to be the keynote speaker for International Women's Day at Pfizer in Rocky Mount. I met two people that actually work, actually was at a mentoring conference that work at Pfizer, and they asked me to speak. So I really enjoyed that, and I just wanted to say it was an honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Weems, do you have any announcements? All right, well, we're down to our agenda, and I will read that into the record, our entire agenda, beginning with item number 1 is the Durham Cultural Advisory Board appointment. Number 2, the Durham Planning Commission appointment. 3, the Housing Appeals Board appointment. Number 4, the Durham Workers' Rights Commission appointments. Number 5, the Durham Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission appointment. Number 6, the approval of city council minutes. Our departmental items, number 7, ordinance to set filing fees for candidates to municipal office in the city of Durham. Item 8, resolution to authorize second opioid settlement and the supplemental agreement for additional funds. Item 9, the American Recovery Plan Act, ARPA project, community-rooted approaches to public health. Item 10, change order number 9 to the construction manager at risk contract with Skanska USA Building, Inc. for the Merrick Park, formerly Hoover Road Park project.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to pull that, please.
Sure. Item 11 is the grant administration agreement and grant project ordinance for reintegration of ex-offenders, First Step Act Initiative, PROWD grant funds.
Madam Mayor, I don't want to pull it. I just wanted to see say how excited I am to see that in our agenda packet today.
Thank you. Item 12, drainage structure, access and stabilization, SD-2023-01. Item 13 is the professional services contract award to Hazen and Sawyer PC for facilities electrical study. Item 14 is the beginning of our presentations, built to last, and that will be chaired by Councilman Williams. Item 15 will be led by Councilwoman Freeman, which is the water quality and land use changes in the Lick Creek watershed. Public hearings. Item number 16 is a public hearing on the fiscal year 2023-24 budget and FY 2024-2029 capital improvement plan, CIP. Item 17 is the consolidated annexation, Wesley Downs. Item 18 is the consolidated annexation, Shady Grove Assemblage. Item 19, the Unified Development Ordinance Text Amendment, simplifying codes for affordable development.
Madam Mayor, am I able to pull that, or no, not this public hearing?
Item 20 is the Development Agreement Novel University Hill. Item 21 is a public hearing on and approval of the Home American Rescue Plan, ARP allocation plan. Item 22, thank you, is FY 2023 to 2024 Annual Action Plan needs public hearing. And that will conclude the reading of our agenda. I have as one pulled item, item 10, pulled by Mayor Pro Tem.
Madam Mayor, this is item 19. Did you want to pull that one or not?
That's for next week.
It's for the 20th.
We have a lot of cards for folks who would like to speak on behalf of item 19, which was one of the items that Councilwoman Hosey Hyman wanted to pull, but I'm going to ask the attorney to explain the process. It's for public hearing for next Monday. So that's actually when we open a public hearing on that, and she'll explain it further. When we open a public hearing on that item, that is when we allow for public comments. Is that correct?
You got it exactly right, Madam Mayor. So if folks want to speak to the subject matter of the hearing itself, they should do so within the context of that public hearing when it's opened, which will be Monday.
The 20th.
20th.
Right. Now, and as a citizen matter today, if they wanted to speak on that issue, because I have a couple of cards here,
Sure.
I'm going to ask you to address how that plays into,
The council procedures do contemplate that at a work session, folks can generally address the council on any topic that they would like. That topic may overlap with a public hearing subject matter, but their comments and the things that they share with the council will not be taken within the context of the public hearing because they are not present after the public hearing is open to make them. So anything that they share today will not become part of the official record.
until next week.
It won't ever become a part of the
Right.
hearing unless they show up.
for next week. So in
Correct.
other words, you can, this is how I'm kind of interpreting what our attorney is saying. You can definitely speak to that item today, but it won't be a part of the official public record unless you come back and do it again on next Monday when it does become a public hearing. Okay? So you will definitely have a chance to address us today, but if you like for it to be officially a part of the public record for that hearing, that will be next Monday night, well, not next Monday night, but the 20th of March at our next city council meeting, okay? So with that in mind, we will start with our citizen matters for today, and I have a number of cards. I'm going to ask Mayor Pro Tem if he will lead us through that.
Yes, ma'am.
Process. I do not believe you have anyone, you do have one person, I believe, online for item 19. The other ones are resource. All right, Mayor Pro Tem.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, to my honorable colleagues all in chamber, here with us personally, those watching on whatever platform. Good to have you here with us at City Hall. Will now, with the mayor's permission, entertain comments from our residents and citizens. We're pleased to do that. Each person will have 3 minutes. I'm going to read about 5 cards at a time, and we're pleased to welcome first Jason Davis, Adam Clark, Bonita Green. I have Bonita Green twice. Mimi Kessler, and Donna Frederick. Online? Okay. Jason Davis, are you here? Welcome, sir. If you approach the podium, just give us your name, and you'll have 3 minutes. Thank you for being with us.
Sorry, is that better? Okay. My name is Jason Davis. I am president of Local 668, which represents 266 of the Durham firefighters. I'm here today to ask you to honor your previous statement in fixing our pay compression that we have within our ranks. We have over 100 firefighters right now within the same 2 pay bands in their firefighter rank. When the pay adjustment was talked about 2 years ago, this council, minus one person, promised us that that was just the beginning of fixing the problem with our pay and how we operate. We are several steps behind. We need this council to ask Human Resources to come up with a plan to help fix our pay. This pay plan was designed by you, and you told us at that point that you would start fixing it then and continue on throughout the years. And we have not seen anything happen since then. We understand that the rest of the city is in the same boat that we are, but we are losing people at a constant rate at this point. Just in the months of December and January, we lost 12 firefighters to other places, whether it be in the fire service or outside of the fire service. And when we talked to those firefighters that left, each one of them stated that their driving factor for leaving was that they were not placed in the appropriate steps after the pay plan had been implemented. So, to give you a little insight, to replace one of those firefighters that has left, and to get a new firefighter out on the street will cost the city roughly $233,863 to replace that one firefighter that has left. That is getting a new recruit in, outfitting them with gear, and getting them through the training to replace that firefighter. It also takes roughly 18 months to get that person filled, that slot filled for that person that has left. We can't operate right now with that number of people that are leaving, and it keeps happening. We keep losing people, and every one of them has said it's because of the pay and not being placed in the appropriate step. We are not asking for anything as far as retro pay. We're not asking for anything like that. All we're asking for is that HR, the city council, the manager's office place us in the appropriate step. I will say this to finish it off. We know that the city is serious about recruiting and retaining employees for the city of Durham. Right now, your employees are your biggest advocates. We have got to take care of them to recruit and retain what we have.
Thank you, Mr. Davis, and thank you for your service. Adam Clark. Welcome to the chamber. If you just state your name, you'll have 3 minutes. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members, all officials present, and staff for having me today. My name is Adam Clark. I'm the executive director of World Relief Durham. We're a faith-based nonprofit that serves immigrants all across the Triangle. And I'm here to talk today about the experience of immigrants in Durham, currently making up about 15% of our residents. In particular, I have those in mind who are either newly arrived or have specific, more acute vulnerabilities. I want to thank the city for its consistent support of refugees, for helping to start Durham Refugee Day. It's our annual celebration in recognition of refugees' contribution to our community, as well as the challenges that they overcome to be here and those that they continue to face. The City Council has passed multiple resolutions and made proclamations over the years that have educated our community, substantiated Durham's commitment to immigrant equity in our city for refugees and for all immigrants. The city also shares a new position with the county, the Immigrant Affairs Coordinator. For all these and other ways that you all see immigrants and serve them, we thank you. The rest of my comments are just about some of the ongoing challenges immigrants are facing in Durham, particularly in health and education. During the pandemic, what has been going on for years in immigrants' lives in Durham became unavoidably clear in the public health sphere. Immigrants are being left out. Thousands of Durham residents who do not speak one of the more common languages never received vital, potentially life-saving information about vaccines, prevention, and treatment. But this has been true for years in regard to almost every kind of health service these community members need and that the rest of us take for granted. In this city of medicine, thousands of immigrant children and families on the margins do not receive public health information in a language that they can understand, and they do not have access to equitable or even adequate health care, nor do they receive weather warnings or educational messages in languages that they can understand. Please expand funding for language access to services so that marginalized language groups can receive equitable access in public messaging to give them access to this information that will allow prosperity in Durham to be shared more with immigrant community members. Last comments are about education. Basically, the same thing is happening in education. The long-term marginalization of immigrants became unavoidably clear during the pandemic. For example, we found immigrant children waiting outside for the buses on the first day of virtual learning. Hundreds of immigrant children did not attend virtual learning for weeks or even months because their households literally did not know school was closed, nor did they own computers if they had known. Thousands of immigrant children in Durham received instruction in a language they don't understand. They're given messaging for themselves and their families which they can't read, and they're held to expectations that have never been explained to them. While I understand the county's role in stewarding schools, the city's collaboration has and can impact these barriers. For example, the participatory budgeting process, Youth Leadership Fund, and other youth-oriented grants have allowed our agency at World Relief and many other agencies in the city to target some of these gaps that are being mentioned. Please continue to grow these programs and find other ways to pull the levers basically that are available to you all to create educational equity and health access equity for Durham's immigrant communities, perhaps through grants specifically targeting immigrant needs.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Appreciate it. Please give our regards to our friends at World Relief. Bonita Green. Good afternoon and welcome to the chamber. If you'll just state your name, you'll have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Mayor O'Neill and fellow members of the council. My name is Bonita Green, and I'm here as the president of the Inter-Neighborhood Council of Durham. INC is here today to address concerns over simplifying codes for more affordable housing, or SCAD for short, by its applicant, Raleigh-based developer James Anthony. The proposal draft of the applicant-sponsored text amendment changes to the UDO are highly technical, complex, and in many cases obscure in their current form. Our committee has worked hard to boil down our findings and to keep our recommendations short and to the point. Over the past 4 weeks, a committee of 9 delegates representing Inter-Neighborhood Council of Durham and their diverse neighborhoods has met 12 times to do a deep dive into the then 85+ pages of privately initiated proposed text amendments to the UDO. We have created a detailed report that will be shared with each of you. It was shared out this morning. Our only agenda in reviewing these documents is for the safety and opportunity for Durham residents to live equitably and in harmony with their neighbors. Today, as each of the Durham residents comes to speak, following me, comes to speak to their specific concerns, we ask for your undivided attention and respect for the time and dedication that each individual has brought to this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Mimi Kessler, good afternoon. Welcome to the chamber. If you'll state your name, you'll have 3 minutes. Thank you for being with us.
My name's Mimi Kessler. I live at 1418 Woodland Drive. I'm here to talk about the SCAD amendments because I want to talk to you before you are contemplating your vote. Have you read the path section on page 31 of the old version, or the January version? There's a new version out yesterday, that they proposed to add to the UDO. I was shocked to read that the affordable housing they proposed only calls for rental units to be affordable for 5 years and for sale units only for the first sale. That means that the first buyer can sell the property the very next day at market rate. By definition, they need money, so it's good for their pockets, but how will that foster generational growth? Generational wealth, I'm sorry. And those in the rental units must move after 5 years. How will that help lower those in the lower wage jobs to be able to remain in Durham in the long term? I don't think that fundamentally solves anything. And their premise that building more will bring prices down is a fallacy. It is a national campaign by the real estate industry because it's profitable for them and therefore also profitable for developers and builders. EHC and these amendments before you are the local expression of that national movement. Many other cities are building like crazy, and it hasn't solved the housing problem for lower wage renters and buyers, not in any city. This deal is not good for Durham. I ask that you carefully read the email that Bonita Green referenced that you should have received this morning. Attached to that is a document that she mentioned, which is an in-depth document where we describe significant problems with the proposal in its current form. I also want to express my outrage that the Inter-Neighborhood Council is not recognized as a legitimate organization to warrant any time on your agenda, which means residents are not legitimately part of the process. It is pitiful if you think that residents can possibly address an 87-page document with this kind of complexity in 3 minutes. I ask you, please read the report, and if you're not willing to listen today. I will give my remarks to the clerk and ask that they be read into the record. Thank you for hearing my plea.
Thank you so much for being with us today. Donna Frederick, good afternoon. Welcome to the chamber. If you'll state your name, you'll have 3 minutes. Good to see you.
Good afternoon. It's Donna Frederick, and I live at 603 East Club Boulevard in Durham. Good afternoon to the chamber. Thanks for having me here for this brief comment. I come before you as a Durham resident for over 30 years, and this SCAD amendment that we are going to be hearing more about on Monday the 20th is very concerning to me. It's concerning to all of us who have spent volunteer hours going through it page by page. My initial question is, how many here have actually read it? It's very deep, it's very long, and we took time and actually read it and went through it. So my question is, how can you possibly get to the point to vote on something that hasn't been read? That's number one. I'm also very concerned about the equity in which this project was presented to the public. It was at most an engagement of show and tell, like in a school. They presented something, we watched it, there was very little engagement. That is not what Durham usually does. We have more questions and there's more interest. Also, there's developing shows a real existing building codes and ordinances which are complicated the way they are. They've more complicated this by trying to change it without proper counsel, I believe. Also, putting SCAD proposal is a very elite and a very expensive venture driven by proposals that this would create more housing at the population growth in Durham the way it's going. This is not true, and it's been addressed many times. Affordable does not necessarily mean more housing. It means affordable housing. Opting that residents are also put in infill conversations with building owners without oversight. There are dangers and there are things that just don't work. We are all the citizens have to use is what we're giving, and sometimes we need civil engagement to correct that. I ask that this be read really in-depthly before making a decision on something that's going to change the lives of Durham for a long time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being with us today. For my next set of cards, Stephen Knill, Jacqueline Wagstaff, and Sherri Zann Rosenthal. Good afternoon, sir. Welcome to the chamber. If you'll state your name, you'll have 3 minutes. Thank you for being with us.
Stephen Knill, 1021 Restoration Drive, co-founder of the Leesville Road Coalition, vice president of the Interneighborhood Council, and an area realtor. Madam Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and Council. At the last council work session, a group led by the Durham Realty Association spoke on affordable housing. During that presentation, multiple members of this council professed they were not experts on development. Council asked for information on housing supply. I forwarded data on that to you all the other day, and I'm happy to discuss it. I'm a realtor, so I pulled it from actual MLS data. The presenters, acting as experts, then took on the opportunity during a work session to ask for big changes in the comp plan and for you to support the SCAD amendment. One of the speakers, a local developer, when asked after the meeting, confirmed he had not read all of the Anthony Amendment, but was told it would be better for him. This seems to be the norm in the development community and among those who are now supporting it. They haven't read the whole thing. I mean, it's monstrous, right, even when it's cut down. I did want to reiterate what Bonita said, that the INC, as a voice of Durham residents, have done a deep dive on this, and we've given it to you today, the public and the media. These are among the farthest reaching development changes in recent Durham history. Affordable housing is not its focus, no matter what the title. As council members have professed not to be experts on development, if they haven't read, studied, or understood any part of it, then you shouldn't vote for it next week on March 20th. The sea changes that will occur almost immediately after a yes vote will be irreversible in the short term, subjecting residents in Durham's most vulnerable neighborhoods to massive negative changes in the quality of their life. From conversations across multiple neighborhoods, this vote, more than any other made this year, could have the biggest impact on whether some of you will be sitting on the dais in 2024. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Knill, for being with us. Next, Jacqueline Wagstaff, good afternoon. Thank you for being with us. If you'll state your name, you'll have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, Jacqueline Wagstaff. Live in Durham. Keep my temperature at 68 degrees just to make sure I'm economically and environmentally safe. Drive an economical car that saves gas. But I'm here for a different reason. Although I'm going to speak on this SCAD on the 20th, I'm here to speak about a situation that I ran into on this week on Tuesday. I happened to be coming down Hillsborough Road, and I happened to see the situation that occurred where the truck ran over the man, the veteran, in the wheelchair. And that gave me pause because this was the same man that I saw in January laying on the same street, getting assistance from Durham EMS, and he was actually trying to crawl back into the street as though he was trying to, leave this world. So when I thought about that, I said, this is a group of people that lives on Hillsborough Road behind the CVS. The homeless population in Durham is out of control. And I hate to say it, but this SCAD crap is going to create a bigger homeless population. And I hope that this council in this budget cycle has really looked into the deep dive of what can we do to try to help some of these homeless. This was a homeless veteran, and he's been, I don't know how many of you travel Hillsborough Road, but they usually sit on that corner coming right up off of 85. And that's unfortunately what happened. And to be standing out there on Tuesday and to see a human beings splattered all out on the street, nobody should be able to see that, but it happened. But the bigger picture is it happened because we have so many people that are in this city with all this great things that are going on, all this $1 million development, don't even have a roof over their head. And they're having to survive in these streets. So I'm hoping that in this budget that you really consider doing something that's measurable, that can be measured, that will help these homeless people. Because I see them every day. I talk to them, they approach me. If I have anything to give them, I give it to them. But this is a bigger picture. And on the SCAD, this whole simplifying code for affordability, that's a force. That's the title they're using to create this vision that they're concerned about affordability. You have a developer that's making disparaging comments about how we can clean up crime and all of these things by displacing people. So, but I'm not going to get into that, but I really want you to look into more money in the homeless population.
Thank you so much, former council member Wagstaff. Thank you for being with us. Sherri Zann Rosenthal, good afternoon, welcome. If you'll state your name, you'll have 3 minutes. Good to have you with us.
Let me get this microphone short enough. Members of council, Mayor O'Neill, I'm Sherri Zann Rosenthal. I live at 2205 Wilson Street in Durham. Going through each provision of this very long private text amendment and explaining why it's problematic takes a lot more time than rolling out AstroTurf and platitudes, which is what I believe you've been given by Mr. Anthony and his team. That's why I'm asking you to restore some balance to this process. Please give an hour to the Interneighborhood Council to go through this proposed ordinance and explain our concerns. Even that's a tight time frame, but I think we could walk you through enough of these amendments that you'll understand their ambiguity, the poor drafting that makes it hard to interpret and apply them, the ways in which they make it difficult to protect Durham's tree canopy and site new shade trees, undermining climate resilience just when we should be planting many more trees, and accounting for stormwater in conscious ways instead of deregulated ways. Some of these amendments undermine provision of emergency services, like EMS and firefighting, and create problems for solid waste and recycling collection. It may interest you to know that most residential builders rarely go through development plan or site plan review. They build on lots that are conventionally sited, which have never required those reviews. It's a nationwide real estate industry tactic to create a panic about a so-called crisis in housing supply and tout deregulation as the answer. However, the data shows that Durham's housing creation has kept pace within 0.02 of a unit per resident with its increase in population, according to DataWorks. The problem is that the housing created is too high-priced. Deregulation is not likely to provide housing that's affordable under any definition, and the Anthony Amendments provide no long-term affordability. The harms of deregulation as we grow and get more dense are already being seen in Durham. The Anthony Amendments would set a terrible precedent using the private text amendment process for something it was never meant for wholesale changes to the development ordinance, which has never been done before, to my knowledge. They undermine the comprehensive plan process. They would be adopted after an anti-democratic process that's unfairly advantaged a developer from Raleigh. And therefore, I request that you provide an hour to the Inter-Neighborhood Council to explain the substantive reasons in this very complicated proposal that we oppose this private text amendment. And let me add, you could do that hour in 2 different shifts of the council. It doesn't have to be official meeting that way. You can do it at an officially noticed meeting. But if you adopt this without that, I think it's premature, and you're going to be shocked by the unintended consequences.
Thank you so much for being with us. I have exhausted all of the cards that have been given to me. I understand we do have a speaker on virtual speaker. Madam Clerk, if you would check in queue, would that be Katie Rose?
Mayor Pro Tem, Katie Rose is not in the queue.
All right, thank you. And that's all I have then for Citizens Matters. They'll be heard at 1 cards and both on our virtual platform. With that, Madam Mayor, I yield back to you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, for carrying us through our Citizens Matters. I have been in consultation briefly about SCAD. I do want to acknowledge that we have received a lot of emails, and as I've set up here discussing it with our attorney and just briefly with our county manager, one of the reasons I believe that Dr. Hosey Hyman wanted to pull it is because she received an actual printout of the original text amendment, and it's very complex. It is very complex. And her desire was to be able to have it broken out into a more understandable format from the staff prior to our getting to the public hearing next week in terms of content and how we break that down. I'm a practicing lawyer, and I've seen it. We're not really practicing, but I'm an attorney. And it is very complex, and so I am going to raise that, as it has been stated several times, for our council members to consider or not whether we will be ready to proceed on next Monday, or whether we talk about it at the end of the work session today, a format that would allow for public comment to come in a way that's a little different than we normally do it, because what we have before us, I think, is a consideration from what I'm hearing that has pretty much never been done before in this format, and it's 87 pages, I believe, somewhere along that. So I do think that we may need to look at it a little differently in order to get us up to speed. And so I just pose that for us to think about what that process can look like that would involve a more extensive hearing or some type of format that would allow for residents to come forth, as well as the development community or Mr. Anthony to come forth and see how we can have it so that both sides are able to come in and explain to us what they're doing and how they want to do it. Yes, ma'am. We will hear from Ms. Young.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sarah Young, Planning Director. In response to, there is a lot of community concern about this. It is accurate statement to say this is the most extensive privately initiated text amendment. I want to address a couple of things. I think we could structure this differently. You all, we could set up a special meeting just to deal with this. The amendment has been broken into parts in the version that is in your agenda packet. So you'll notice there was a change from, speakers have mentioned, it's 87 pages, it's down to 52. That is a virtue of a couple of things that I just want to put out on the record because we get a lot of questions about this. That is due to taking out portions that were not being changed. The applicants had a lot of text in there that was actually not changing. So to streamline the amendment, we have removed that because those portions should not be in an amendment if they're not changing, as well as changing the font and just doing some formatting things to make it more compact. We've also organized it into parts. So those parts could be discussed individually at the meeting as a way to kind of help compartmentalize and focus on a topic at a time. So those are my suggestions. We could have a separate meeting, but we also have chunked it, if you will, into those parts, and the discussion could follow those.
I think also one of the things that may be helpful, at least for me, I'm sort of a visual person. I think I may have raised this, I think I might have talked about it with Councilman Williams maybe last meeting, I'm not sure, but the ability to kind of put it in a context in terms of, I don't know that I can speak for me. When you talk about developments and what actually that looks like once a developer comes in, presents the paperwork and that process, what does that look like from a visual standpoint or some type of schematic or something so that we have an understanding whether it's you're trying to build a remodel on your house, or you're trying to build an ADU, or you're trying to build a small apartment complex or a large one. We're, from my vantage point, when we're talking about this particular document, it's in a vacuum. So you have to have it to land somewhere so that people can kind of understand what that structure is. Where does this amendment fit in this particular scenario? We have a bunch of documents, and we're used to reading documents, but if you don't have a kind of place to land it so that it makes sense, it doesn't make sense. You're just reading. And so for me, I needed to make sense, in a real sense, in a real world sense. I think we got a video today from Attorney Rosenthal to kind of highlight what the Inner City Neighborhood Council is saying about the real effects of some of these amendments that are being requested. So it helps to kind of anchor it, and then for us to be able to hear from both sides, right? They've expressed an hour to come in and be able to talk. I'm sure Mr. Anthony would like to, his group probably would like to have the same amount of time. I think with something this large and this complex, you have to do, in my mind, due diligence, and it doesn't. This is not the run-of-the-mill kind of thing that we're doing in this arena, and it will serve us well that we understand it for ourselves individually, that the community at large understands it in a context, and then we are prepared to see where you vote. So I would like for us to think about it as we go through this meeting, but I am suggesting that we do something different for this type of hearing that would accommodate our learning for everybody, and then we know that we have done due diligence to move forth one way or another. Okay? All right. So we have a pulled item. I'll turn it back over to Mayor Pro Tem for pulled item number 10.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, colleagues. Can I introduce yourself?
Rod Florence, Project Management, General Services.
Good to see you, and thank you for being with us. So I been reading a lot of these things over the years, and I think this is the first time I've ever seen a construction change order that it does some other things, but also goes specifically to addressing a criminal act, vandalism, stolen materials, or vandalized materials, vandalized and stolen materials. And I know obviously we've had stuff stolen and damaged before, and we've always treated it as, we're self-insured as a city, we just paid for it, but I've never seen it ensconced in a change order before this type of activity. So I guess my first question is, does this change order involve just replacing equipment, or what type of security measures were defeated in order for this vandalism to be successful? Were locks broken? Were they not properly screened? Because if we're just replacing it, I'd like to know what's going to be different, and will it be as vulnerable as it was last time? So talk to me about the protocols, the security protocols that had to be defeated, and is this just another purchase of the same equipment?
The vandalism occurred shortly after the park opened, and so there was very little traffic in the park. The gate out front didn't get broken, but a lot of the equipment was stolen out of the breaker panels, which was broken. A lot of the equipment was also stolen out of the ground. They actually broke the pull boxes and pulled the wires out of the ground and disconnected a lot of the wires from the poles. Since then, we have reported this to the police department. They're doing patrols at some kind of regulated rate. And also, we've added a security system that has cameras on the restroom building that captures visuals of the site. As the spring comes and as we get the lights and the electrical back restored, we'll expect that the amount of attendance in the parks will help the security issue with visibility and people being there. But the replacement of the system, we're recommending be done by the contractor, since it's specific to all the construction work that they did, and get that replaced and supported by risk after the after the work has been done.
So the thing that will be different about our posture after the replacement of the equipment is there'll be cameras there that weren't there before.
Correct.
And we're anticipating that increased traffic will add to the security, the robustness of the security there. Is that correct?
That is correct, and also additional locks and safety measures on the panels. They actually put a bar across the panel that will secure it in a strong way, because that's where a lot of the expensive equipment was stolen from, the electrical panel.
All right. Whatever type of locks or bars we have on these boxes that were vandalized, is that uniform throughout our entire nexus of equipment?
Yes, on the lighting projects that I worked on, is the key lock on all the panels. Some of the panels are in storage rooms, but some are outside in gated areas. We're in the process on new lighting projects. We're in the process of gating all those panel areas and locking those gates and putting them inside storage rooms where we can. But right now, it's just the key for the panel.
All right, well, thank you so much. And thank you for the great work on that park. Hopefully we'll have better luck moving forward. But thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I yield back.
Thank you so much. I believe that was our only pulled item. And so we will now turn our attention to our presentations. We have two presentations today, item 14 and 15. The first is Built to Last, and that will be headed by Councilman Leonardo Williams. The second will be our Lick Creek Watershed presentation, and that will be led by Deidrona Freeman in that order. I'll turn it over to you, Councilman.
Thank you so much. I invite you all to the podium. So we will hear your presentation on the Built to Last. I believe we have Chair Daniels and Dr. Blackwell.
Excuse me, Councilmember Williams, just a brief announcement to folks who are speaking at the mic. Staff has asked that you don't touch the mic itself because it creates all of the sound in the background. So just a note.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Anita Daniels. I live at 102 Nut Tree Way in Durham, North Carolina. We are trying to show our video. I'm not sure what's going on with the sound and if there's anyone available who can help us.
Okay, they're probably coming out. They're listening, I'm sure. That may be it. Is that it?
Can you hear it?
Okay. And we need sound.
It's on max. Did you click that?
While we're waiting, Dr. Blackwell, we've allocated 30 minutes for your presentation. Don't feel compelled to take the whole 30 minutes if you don't need to, but we would like to be able to, interact with you all and ask questions and hear what you have to say. So you have ample amount of time. Thank you all for being here.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, there's no sound to the video, and they're calling the vendor in the back in DTN. We'll have to do this later.
Okay, Dr. Blackwell, would you all like to just start with the presentation while they work on that? And if they can get it situated by the end, we can show it at the end.
As I said, I am Anita Daniels. I am chair of the board for Built to Last. I'd like to acknowledge our mayor and our mayor pro tempore, all of the counselors and our staff. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. And most importantly, I'd like to thank you for your commitment to Built to Last by creating this organization. Probably in 2018, before my time serving on the board. I'd like to recognize one of our board members who is here with us, Reverend Dr. Keith Daniel. We're not related, but it feels like we are. And also Dr. Joyce Blackwell, who is our executive director. We were hoping that our video would answer a lot of the questions that we believe you have for us. But I will start by talking about the three components of Built to Last. I also want to thank those who attended our unveiling last Friday. That was a wonderful, wonderful time. We had over 100 people in attendance with us at North Carolina Central University. Built to Last was created through the city of Durham. We are now officially a nonprofit as of June 14, 2021. So that is another milestone that we have met per the request. We are an organization that has 3 divisions. One of them is our Enterprise Training Center. We also have a relationship with the Durham Compact, and we are in the process of developing our Bull City Equitable Distribution Venture Fund. And so we I want to share a little bit about what I have done since I became board chair in October. One of the things that I asked our executive director to do was to help coordinate some meetings with some foundations so we could start seeking funding from other entities. We have met with Golden Leaf Foundation, Triangle Community Foundation, Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation, and we have also met with the leadership at Mechanics and Farmers Bank to talk about different ways that we can secure funding. I will say everyone that we've met with was very receptive, excited to hear from us. see it as a wonderful partnership for them to engage. We have also recruited board members whose names I would like to share with you because you probably know some of them, and it is on our video. I don't know if we'll get to show it. But Dr. Zann Wilson, who is at North Carolina Central, D. Warren Langley, who many of you know, who has been very involved in this community since he was 14 years old, Kurt Merriweather, Dr. Deborah Parker, who is very instrumental in serving child care agencies and helping in that arena. As I mentioned, Reverend Dr. Keith Daniel, John Bryson, and we are in the process of finishing up our recruitment with several people that we'll be meeting with, even though it's Thursday, we'll be meeting with them this week and trying to fill those different slots. Trying to see the other things that I want to say before I step aside. We did give to you our business plan that includes staffing. It also includes how we intend to move forward with raising funds, how we believe you can continue to partner with us in this area. And I will ask Dr. Blackwell to come forward and share the comments that she'd like to share. And then we will have questions unless Reverend Dr. Daniel would like to make comments as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Daniels. Well, good afternoon. I'm Mary Lane O'Neill, as well as Mayor Pro Tem Mark Anthony Middleton, City Manager Page, and others who are here today. First and foremost, let me thank you, really thank you for really truly helping us to start Built to Last Innovations Lab Incorporated. For me personally, it has really truly been a labor of love. It has been a heavy lift, but nonetheless a lift that has been truly worthy of the work that we're doing. Just in case you don't get an opportunity to see our video and hear our video presentation, I just want to add too that Built to Last Innovations Lab became an independent entity in July 2021. It, of course, gained its articles of incorporation from the Secretary of State of North Carolina on June 14th, 2021. We became an independent entity July 2021. And since that time, of course, we have really truly been working to not only build a new nonprofit, a startup, but also operating it simultaneously. Currently, Built to Last Innovations Lab has 3 divisions, 2 that are fully or are operational at this time, 1 that will hopefully come online at the latter part of this year or early next year. The 2 that are fully operational are the Bull City Enterprise Training Center, where we offer courses, training, technical assistance, and even in some instances, certifications to historically underrepresented businesses and others. In addition to that, we have the Durham Collaborative, formerly known as the Durham Compact. And this particular organization was a part of our planning early on when we were still a part of the Office of Economic and Workforce Development. It is a group of about now 25 volunteers who are assisting me with identifying, securing, and mobilizing strategic partners who are willing to leverage their resources to support Built to Last initiatives. And then, of course, the other division will be the Bull City Equitable Development Fund division that we are currently working on now. I am the only full-time staff member of Built to Last. We do have now a total of 2 FTEs. We have 2 part-time people. We have, of course, the executive administrative assistant who works part-time, Walisha Thornton, who you saw today working with our technology, and Precious Allen, who's part-time manager of the Bull City Enterprise Training Center. We also have 2 consultants who are still working with us, led by Dr. Jim Johnson. And many of our courses initially will be offered really by Dr. Johnson and some of the professors at UNC's Keenan Flagler Business School. I am right now meeting with the Dean of NCCU's Business School, Dr. Anthony Nelson, as well as his counterpart at Duke University, Dr. Mitch Savo, in looking at ways in which we can partner with those 2 universities as well. And so there are a lot of things that are going on. We are open to questions that you have at this particular time regarding Built to Last. And certainly we hope to continue to have your support as we move forward. It, again, as I said, it truly has been, for me personally, a labor of love, primarily because with its mission, and by the way, it has a dual mission. With its mission, we can transform the lives of so many individuals in this city. Our dual mission, number 1, the first mission, primary mission, is to provide access to training, access to capital, and access to opportunity to historically underrepresented businesses. And the second mission, and we also offer that access to those individuals in our marginalized communities or our economically distressed communities. So we do have a dual mission, contrary to sometimes what people think. And we are putting in place, and we have begun moving forward with initiatives that will help both of those groups. So again, thank you very much for having us here. And by the way, I'm Dr. Joyce Blackwell. I'm from 106 Longview Trail here in Durham, North Carolina. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Blackwell, Chair Daniels, Reverend Dr. Daniel. Colleagues, we'll open it up for questions amongst us, as they are still working on the sound.
I don't, good afternoon to the 3 of you all that I know quite so well. I don't have a question or anything. I just want to tell you that I really enjoyed going over to North Carolina Central University and joining you all for breakfast for the grand opening. But you all have put in a lot of hard work. We give kudos to former Mayor Steve Ashur, who was, I believe, instrumental in getting Built to Last off the ground, along with Andre Pettigrew in the Office of Workforce Development. So we say congratulations, and we look forward to the great work that you're already doing. And thank you all so much for always being great community volunteers and leaders.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Caballero.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Good to see you all. Had a great time with you. I just wanted to say that this is a great example. I still remember when we first received the presentation about this idea, and it would have been in March of 2018. So to see the work and fruition of this is incredible, and I look forward to its success and to improving Durham residents' lives and our commitment to shared economic prosperity, which was, you know, the value that we all committed to. And this is just another tool to get us there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Caballero. Councilmember Hosey Hammond. I was about to say Johnson again.
She's not even here today. Thank you so much. I just also wanted to echo the sentiments of the mayor and my other colleague. Needed work. I think it's something that's going to really help the residents. And I just also want to say this is so humbling for me because Dr. Joyce Brackwell is a mentor of mine, actually one of the people who got me here. She had wanted me to come to direct the program at St. Aug in social work, and so she saw something in me before I saw it in myself, so I want to thank you. And then also my colleague, Anita Daniels, who also teaches with me at Central. And so I just, again, thank you for the work, and I'm just looking forward to what this is going to bring for our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Colleagues? All right, I'll just close with, it's been a pleasure working with you all. The meetings that we've had for me to better understand. When Built to Last was introduced, I was sitting in the audience that night. Mayor Shaw was recognizing my wife and I for something, and it was in that same state of the city. I remember hearing it, and I was like, wow, this is intriguing. I never thought I'd be sitting in the seat facilitating your presentation. So full circle. Thank you for the work that you're doing. I won't take up time asking questions as we've spent quite a bit of time together. Well, I will ask one question. What would you need for us to, not necessarily in a formal way, and I'm more so speaking about myself here, not even a question. Let me know how I can help with sort of being just a source of credibility in the work that you're doing for reaching out to your external sources for fundraising. Everybody asks for money, especially that's what nonprofits do. But you know, when donors are out there, they want to know, like, okay, so who's affiliated with you? I don't mind lending myself in my capacity as a person, not necessarily as the city, to support in those endeavors. So as I always say, don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you for your work. And unfortunately, we couldn't get the video to play, so we'll just have it sent to each council member and make it available for the public. At your website, builttolast.com. builttolasts.innovationlabs.org. Thank you. Innovations with an S. Thank you. I will hand it over to Councilmember Freeman.
Thank you. And I believe the item that we're hearing from is the water quality and land use changes in Lick Creek Watershed. And I do believe we have someone here to speak.
I have a little presentation here that I can pull up. If I can get this working. Shows up on, oh, there we go. Okay. Thank you all so much, Mayor O'Neill, Mayor Pro Tem Middleton, council members. My name is Samantha Kropp, for the record. I am here speaking in my role as the Neuse River Keeper with the Southeastern North Carolina-based nonprofit Sound Rivers. You all have probably seen me up here before giving comments on the topic of water quality and land use changes, so I really, really appreciate the opportunity to expand on some of the things that I've been saying in the shorter comment periods, and to share with you some of the observations that I've been making as I have engaged in water quality documentation in the Lick Creek watershed. So before I kind of dive in, I want to share a little bit more about Sound Rivers, the nonprofit, and who I am. We're a 42-year-old organization. We work both in the Neuse watershed and also the Tar-Pamlico watershed, and we're part of a statewide coalition of waterkeepers in North Carolina, and also part of an international organization called the Waterkeeper Alliance. So we have a lot of great resources and information sharing that goes on within the organization and our larger coalition. My role specifically is to focus on the 6,200 plus square mile Neuse watershed. I'm based in Raleigh, but I work throughout the watershed, and really the way that I describe my job is kind of being a conduit between people who live in the watershed and rely on water quality, and the regulators who are responsible for implementing regulatory rules and also the people who are responsible for making them. So I like to say that I work for the people of the Neuse River and also for the river itself. And as you all have heard me talk about, I have been a part of engaging in monitoring for water quality in Lick Creek for a while. The reason why I got involved is because we as an organization actually respond to calls from community members. When there's concerns about pollution, water quality, we pick up the phone, we're a hotline, and we investigate. As I mentioned, it's a really big watershed that I work in, and this area, Lick Creek, that I'm going to talk more about, has actually become a really large focus of my responsibility, and that's because of the significant water quality concerns that I've been documenting since last fall in that area. And so this has risen as a high priority for me. I've put a lot of time into this because I haven't seen sedimentation issues that rises to this caliber anywhere else in my jurisdiction of the Neuse watershed. So my goal today in sharing this information with you is really to just kind of demystify some of the water quality data that you may have seen thrown around, to provide a little bit of context for that, and to talk about a path forward. I'm definitely here as an advocate for housing, especially low-income housing. That's a priority for me and a value system that I hold. And I think that we can do that while protecting water quality. And so I want to talk about what that might be able to look like. Before I get into the water quality sampling data, I wanted a little bit of background on the Lick Creek watershed. I know that you all have heard a lot about this, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but some highlights. It's only a 22.9 square mile watershed, so it's not that large. We're talking about a really specific area in southeast Durham. It is listed as biologically impaired on the 303D list, which essentially means that it was found to not be adequately supporting aquatic life. And the reasons for that were listed as turbidity and bacteria. And that was back in 2006. And so that was from a combination of human activity at the time, agricultural activity at the time, and the underlying Triassic soils, which you all, I know, have heard a lot about as well. But that's really important here. This is part of a really specific part of North Carolina that covers a little over half of Durham County, the Triassic Basin. The soils are incredibly erosive, very fine particles. Basically all this to say, this is a really unique area. It's sensitive and we need to treat it with kind of more caution and care than maybe some other parts of Durham County. It is also, as you all know, a tributary of Falls Lake, which is a drinking water source, I know not for Durham, but for Wake County and many others. It's important to note that the last time a cumulative watershed restoration plan or a cumulative impact study was done in this area was in 2009. And that was done by the state agencies, the Department of Environmental Quality, in conjunction with a number of other community partners and nonprofits. And in that study in 2009, it was highlighted that the most significant risk to water quality in the future was land use changes that were underregulated. And the most high priority actions suggested in this watershed restoration plan were to strengthen sediment and erosion control regulations and strategically protect green space. I'm going to talk a little bit more about those, but unfortunately, those recommendations were not heeded, and a significant amount of development, as you all know, has happened since that time in the watershed. And I think I shared this photo in a previous comment briefly. I just wanted to revisit it. I'm going to talk a lot about in-stream sedimentation. I'm going to show pictures from turbidity that I've recorded in waterways on the ground in Lick Creek. But everything that I'm talking about isn't just about the sediment that's suspended in the stream. This is also ending up in Falls Lake. This isn't just in Lick Creek and tributaries. This is depositing in Falls Lake. In this photo, you can see on the right-hand side, this was after a rainstorm, and on the left-hand side, it was previous rain before a rainstorm, both of these times during significant land use changes. And you can see on the right, this is what we're actually seeing with satellite images. This is not a one-time occurrence. There is sediment being deposited in Falls Lake. And so this really is just to say, these images, these pictures that you all are so familiar with, the tomato soup, so-called tomato soup, this is not normal. It's not normal anywhere in the Neuse watershed, and it's not normal even in the Triassic Basin. I've had the great pleasure of connecting with many community members who have been kind enough to let me go onto their properties to sample the creeks behind their homes. And one of them is an older woman, a grandmother, and she has lived here since forever. And she talks to me about a time that she remembers playing in the creek. And she remembers her kids playing in the creek, and her kids remember the creek being clean. Now, that creek was one of the highest turbidity readings that I got in the field in all of my time since last fall sampling. And so to say, you know, this matter is not ahistorical and it's not natural. This is just to quickly show the 4 locations that I have been sampling. The 4 blue dots are the places that I have been visiting. These are different than Durham, the city of Durham's sampling sites. These essentially were chosen to try and isolate the impacts of development. So we looked at where land use changes were occurring and tried to look at the effects it was having on nearby waterways. So those 4 blue dots, 2 of them are on the main stem of Lick Creek, where Olive Branch Road meets Lick Creek and where Kemp Road meets Lick Creek, and 2 of them are on significant tributaries of Lick Creek. So that's Hurricane Creek on the west, and on the eastern tributary, that's Martin Branch. And suffice it to say, I recorded extremely high levels of turbidity, not just in Lick Creek proper, but in the tributaries, and not just on one day, but on many days across many occurrences. This is not an isolated event. This is happening in an ongoing fashion across significant parts of the watershed in Lick Creek. So these are just some photos from different waterways, different areas, different months. And I'm not going to get into big detail here because these are numbers that probably don't mean a lot to folks who aren't mired in water quality, but I just wanted to show as an offering to discuss any of this further with folks who are interested. And I actually have been out again to the field since these slides were submitted a couple weeks ago, so it's missing a bit of data. But the important thing to note here is that the state water quality standard for surface water, so this is not for drinking water, it's for ambient surface water, is 50 NTU. And everything that I've highlighted in red here exceeds the state surface water quality standard. So these are all water quality violations. And as you can see, some of them exceed the standard by 2, 3, 4 times, even a magnitude. And this is, again, regular observation, regularly documented. It's also important for me to note that recently the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality has taken notice of the water quality issues in this area, and they did go out and sample these sites, and their data confirms the issue that I've been highlighting in our documentation, that there is significant water quality pollution happening as a result of land use changes in this area. I'm not going to read these. This is just a summary of what I just said. But essentially, the takeaway is there are concerning levels of turbidity in these areas, far above state standards. So where is this all coming from? There are a few key issues going on here. Actually, 2, I would categorize them as 2 key areas. The first is that we, unfortunately, have a lot of developers who are not complying with our current regulations. If you look at, one resource that I wish I could have included in this presentation, but that I only was able to get together with our GIS team recently, but I'd be happy to share, is a map of all of the development sites and their history of compliance based on their inspection reports. And the vast majority of these sites have been out of compliance at least once. Many of them are consistently out of compliance. And that results in sediment leaving the site and entering Lick Creek. These photos are of just that, sediment leaving sites coming off of tributaries and meeting Lick Creek, and you can visually see the difference here in water quality. So that issue is, essentially the rules aren't being followed. The second issue is that, and this speaks to the ongoing text amendment updates that you all are about to see before you that deal with sediment and erosion control, but our current regulations aren't doing the trick. The combination of the scope and scale of development happening in the Lick Creek watershed plus the underlying Triassic soils has resulted in a situation where the regulations as they stand are not doing their job of keeping sediment out of the creek. So this site that I have photoed here actually has a history of being out of compliance in the first place, also has received a notice of violation for being out of compliance. But this photo is actually of a standard SNEC procedure. This is not breaking any rules in this photo. What is supposed to be happening is that this pipe is supposed to be dewatering a non-sediment filled pond. It's supposed to be taking out cleaner water and dumping it into that rocky feature, which is an SNEC feature. But unfortunately, because these soils are so small, they don't settle very well, and because these sediment ponds are likely not large enough to allow time for this to settle, what's happening is it's piping out dirt, and that dirt on the right-hand side is flowing into Lick Creek. I measured turbidity, that was over a magnitude higher than state standards, and it was flowing into Lick Creek at a place where before the confluence, it was passing state standards. So it was directly polluting Lick Creek. And this was not a one-time thing. I documented this happening a couple times, and most recently, when I was out of town on the West Coast at a conference this past weekend, some neighbors reported to me that this was happening again this weekend. So this is happening regularly, and there are no rules being broken here. There's a Clean Water Act violation, but there are no sediment and erosion control rules being broken. So I want to pause for a moment and just address this burning question of why do we even care about sediment in the creek. This is the first question I get when I present to anyone about turbidity. It's a valid question, so I want to take a moment to address it from a couple angles. As you might guess, and as everyone probably knows, it's bad for aquatic life. It pollutes our waterways. That's a starting place. Not only is it bad for aquatic life when it settles to the ground, to the bottom of the riverbed, and chokes out habitat, but it also is bad when it's floating in the water column. It's reducing oxygen supply, it's blocking sunlight, which gets in the way of the ability of subaquatic vegetation to grow, which is a food source. And it also, importantly, heats up the water column, which is a big problem for a lot of fish populations. It's also a problem for us. So turbidity in us, again, if we don't care at all about aquatic species, we should care about our own communities and ourselves, and I know that everyone here does deeply. So just to make that connection clear, the first area of concern, turbidity co-occurs with elevated levels of bacteria and contaminants. In fact, in many cases, turbidity is used as an indicator of measuring things like pathogens and bacteria and contaminants in water quality testing. So that's a big, important one. Turbidity also is really bad for those who are filtering the water for drinking downstream. Not only is it bad because, as you might guess, it gunks up the works of water treatment. The dirtier the water, the more chemical treatment you have to use. But also, by warming up the temperature, it's increasing bacteria and pathogens, and that's a huge headache. Before I moved to North Carolina, I am from Western North Carolina in part, and moved out to Oregon, and for 10 years, I worked on impacts of land use changes like industrial clear cutting on drinking water supplies, and I saw water treatment plants having to do multi-million-dollar upgrades because of dirt in the water. So that picture that I showed of Falls Lake with sedimentation is a concern for people who are drinking the water out of Falls Lake. Also, it's important to note that this is a property value thing. It's a quality of life thing. It's kind of a duh, but studies across the board show that people prefer to choose places to live that have clean water and clean air. Property values go up. A healthy river enhances the economic values of homes and communities. Clean water and clean air are two of the most important factors, I think, that we can think about when we're trying to raise property values, increase quality of life. The grandmother who I know who used to swim in the creek, that was a quality of life thing for her. And I think that everyone who has these creeks flowing through their backyards in these new subdivisions deserves to have clean water. And I think everyone would agree. So for the last short bit of time, I just want to talk about solutions. I wanted to reserve sufficient time to talk about this because it's important. In my opinion, I think there's a couple things that are extremely important. And I guess I should qualify that when I say my opinion, I'm not just speaking as myself, I'm speaking on behalf of Sound Rivers, the nonprofit, and the many experts that we've brought in to inform this discussion. So I think the very first thing that we could probably all agree needs to happen is to stop the harm. Whenever there's an emergency, we need to prevent the harm from being ongoing. And the second thing is we really need to update this analysis. It's been since 2009 since there's been an analysis on water quality, and we're lacking in information to be making responsible decisions about land use changes in this part of the watershed without an updated analysis, especially since the recommendations in the 2009 analysis were not heeded. So it's time to update that. To tease out what number one looks like, what does stopping the harm look like? I would say the first main thing to address the first issue I brought up, which is the failure of developers, many developers, to follow the rules that exist, so the lack of enforcement that's on the ground, is I would say we really need to support our Durham County staff in financing them to have more staff members. Right now, there's very few who are overseeing all of Durham County, and that's a lot of work. Durham County Sediment and Erosion Control has its hands full, and clearly needs more capacity, clearly needs more staffing. I think one of the things that is asked for in one of the UDO text amendments is the ability for them to issue stop work orders. That's fantastic. Anything that can give them more leverage to enforce the rules that exist is fantastic and really should be prioritized, so that we don't have so many out of compliances, we don't have so many rule breaking that's happening on the ground. The second thing is updating the existing rules. So the number one thing that we can do to protect rivers and streams and water quality is to keep more trees on the ground, especially around waterways. And I will say that we submitted pretty significant substantive technical comments on the sediment and erosion control and phased grading text amendments that will be coming before you all in the future. And I won't get into extreme detail now, but I will say I would really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this more. I have met with Ryan Eves and Jonathan McNeil and Sarah Young about these in detail, and unfortunately, I will say that I do not believe that the current versions of the amendments are going to go far enough to do what needs to be done in terms of strengthening regulation. We need to see regulations that require more trees left on the ground, especially around waterways. The current updates to the regulations actually removed an important clause that prevented the double counting of pre-existing required buffers as tree retention. That's really wonky, but basically it means that many developers are going to be able to point to their preserved buffers that are required by state law along waterways and say, we've done our tree prevention, our tree protection already. That's a problem. Additionally, the current phase grading amendment allows for up to 50 acres of mass grading at a time. I understand that there's tree preservation requirements that go along with it, but when developers are not required to retain trees, when they're allowed to replace them, that means that we still have giant clear cuts on the landscape. And in the Triassic Basin, this is our key problem here, is big gaping wounds on the landscape that aren't being covered up and replaced. So just to say, green space is incredibly important. There was an incredibly helpful peer-reviewed study done that showed that every additional 1% of forest cover retained translates to 3% less turbidity. And that translates to all the other, less turbidity, all the other good things we talked about. So cannot overemphasize the importance of retaining green space on the landscape. And the last piece in terms of recommendations really falls under the category of preparing for the small particle soil that we have in the Triassic Basin. This is unique soil. We need to have our SNEC recommendations ready and dealing with that type of soil. So towards that end, there's a provision in there that deals with flocculants. Fantastic. I think that will be very helpful. We did recommend water sampling in the surface water areas that are receiving the flow from flocculant use, basically to ensure that it's working and to ensure that chemical flocculants aren't getting into our streams. We also need bigger stormwater ponds. We all know that climate change is real. We're getting more rain on the landscape. We need to be preparing for the 100-year storm. Right now, the UDO text amendment suggests 25-year storm. That's not going to work for what we have here. So across the board, some developers are doing this already, and it would be great to see them all required to do that in this sensitive area. And a number of other things that I won't get into great detail on, but again, I would really value the opportunity to talk about the detailed text amendments with you all. And I will say that, as they stand now, I do not think that they will do the job of stopping the harm. To kind of conclude, I would say, these are not huge asks. These are things that a lot of other municipalities are doing. These are things that will not stop development. These enhanced regulations are things that would make for development more responsible and probably happier communities down the line with cleaner water. So this is my last slide, the what's next. This is a map that we put together of the developments in Lick Creek Watershed that have been approved or where land cleaning is underway or where they're proposed. Since this map was submitted a couple weeks ago, there were actually three new areas that were proposed in neighborhood meetings. So 3 of these unshaded areas on here, big blocks, have been proposed. And as a trend, the development is moving east towards Falls Lake. So I guess I would just conclude with saying, I think now is as good a time as ever for City Council to take action. It's not too late for the Lick Creek Watershed. It would be a good time for us to heed the recommendations that were made back in 2009, to at least look at them and consider them. And while that's happening, I think it's important to take a pause. And I know that you all have been hearing this, and I want to be clear that this doesn't mean no more development. It means a pause in this part of the watershed until impacts can be better understood, stronger regulations can be enforced, and until we can make a promise that more development in the future will also come with the promise to uphold the Clean Water Act, which I know is, part of Durham's value system, is not just, healthy, safe, vibrant communities, welcoming communities, diverse communities, but a promise for, clean water, clean air. I think we all value that. So I would really appreciate the opportunity to talk more, and thank you all so much.
Thank you. I appreciate the presentation, and I'm going to turn to my colleagues, and I see Councilmember Williams has his hands up.
Thank you, Samantha, for this pretty in-depth presentation. Listening to your presentation and then also looking at what we're creating with JLO, the Jordan Lake One Water establishment, and what's happening with the UNRBA. And, when I look back in history, it does give me a little concern that it appears that it's almost been communicated that the recent events are causing these issues, when in fact there's been an issue out there since 1981, and we can't realistically take a pause. We can make adjustments, and I think what really drives me to a complicated place is the regulations that we currently have in place and the regulations that are proposed are more strict than anywhere else in the state. And they're getting even more, they're getting stricter. So that's not a direct response to you. It's just that it is really complicated. And when I see your presentation and then I see what's happening in the other organizations, something's not adding up. So I'm going to ask if there is any staff, Attorney O'Toole or Sarah, is there a way we can respond to the work that's already been done? I thought I saw Ryan here too. Okay. And the reason why I'm asking you all to respond, I don't want it to appear as if we don't care. And I do take pause with the word pause, because if we don't develop, if we don't approve, there's still going to be development. It's just going to be by right, so there will be houses built. It's just going to be less dense, and it's going to be more exclusive and more expensive. So I don't want to come off as we don't really care. I also don't want to come off as we're just, don't care what's going on out there. We're just going to keep building and pounding the ground out there. But I also want to make sure that it's clearly articulated that we're conscious to this and that we are trying to respond to it.
Sure thing. Good afternoon, Council. City Attorney Don, Senior Deputy City Attorney Don O'Toole. Just to respond at the outset, I think a number of things were conflated here in this presentation. So just for the listening public, I want to make sure everyone knows there's two different phases of construction that Ms. Kropp mentioned here. The first phase is the construction phase. And here in the county of Durham, even within the city of Durham, that's regulated by the county, the sedimentation and erosion control folks. That happens through within the city due to an interlocal agreement we have with the county. One of the things, and Ryan Eves here with the county, he can address it more directly because he leads that department, but the state basically dictates what Ryan's group does with the county, the rules that can be enforced on active construction anywhere within the county. So those rules come from the state. It's also, and I think Ryan has explained this on a number of occasions, given the development in the Lick Creek watershed and given that it's in Triassic soils, the county has approached the state sedimentation and erosion control board to seek extra measures above and beyond what's allowed anywhere else in the state. One of the issues that Ryan has tried to explain repeatedly, a lot of the slides that you're seeing here, the water clearly is not clear water, but it's also not sediment in the water. And the state regulations are aimed at sediment in the water. So one of the measures that, and the state statutes, the sedimentation and erosion control statutes, those statutes are geared to sediment, not fine clay particles in the water. Ryan has approached the state to get permission for the county to have enhanced measures above and beyond what's allowed anywhere else in the state. They got an initial thumbs up from the Sedimentation and Erosion Control Board. Now it comes back to the city and county to approve those extra measures. And then the final step is after the state board knows that the local governments want these regulations, the proposal, as I understand it, is those would be approved at the state board's meeting in May of this year. And so that's what's being done on the sedimentation and erosion control level. Again, that is during construction. Our public works folks, and we have Michelle Woolfolk here, who's prepared to answer any questions you have, as well as other members from public works, they administer what's called the post-construction stormwater control measures. And I dare say no jurisdiction has tighter post-construction stormwater rules than the city of Durham. We hear this from developers all the time. The city of Durham is actually divided up into 3 different areas. Part of the city is subject to the Jordan Lake rules, part of it's subject to the Falls Lake rules, and then we have a little part of the pie down near Research Triangle Park that's actually subject to the Neuse River rules. Development in any of those parts of the city is subject to our extensive post-construction stormwater rules. This area is tightly regulated. The city has what's called a stormwater NPDES permit. That is a federal permit that's administered by the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. DEQ tells the city what it's obligated to do as far as stormwater. I'll just add the city's stormwater department, our public works stormwater folks, they were audited just this past year. I've seen the compliance report that the state issued. We are fully in compliance. Maybe some minor areas to be tweaked or things that need to be done in the coming year, but Michelle's group is totally on top of that. The other thing that I'll just add, and I should have covered this when I talked about the county sedimentation and erosion control folks, they were named the large sedimentation and erosion control program in the state by the Sedimentation and Erosion Control Board for 2022. That means they are doing a good job. So, like I said, this is an area of very tight regulation. Ryan and his group are seeking enhanced regulations. And the third part of this puzzle is planning, the city-county planning department. And Sarah Young and Grace Smith are here and they can answer questions on that. I don't have it in front of me, but there are a whole series of UDO text amendments that they are working on to enhance construction phase work, tree preservation, mass grading, phasing of development to try to break it up into smaller phases. And there are probably other areas. And the one other thing that I also know that council is aware of, one of the things that we're currently seeing is developers that come forward with consolidated annexation items in this watershed. As part of their rezonings, if there's a development plan attached to it, they are usually proffering these enhanced stormwater control measures before these regulations take effect. But that's, sorry for the long-winded answer, but those are the many things that the county and city staff are actively working on in order to make sure we are living up to our NPDES stormwater requirements. One other thing that I'm going to take issue with is Ms. Kropp indicated that we are violating the Clean Water Act. That is definitively not true. And I don't want any city resident to be misled that we are in violation of the Clean Water Act, because that's not true. I think I'm happy to stop.
Thank you. So I asked for Attorney O'Toole to just sort of respond, because your presentation is driving a lot of concern, and I don't want you to feel like it's falling on deaf ears. It's like what you're presenting is what the resident is seeing and what we're seeing as well. And then we have what we're seeing from staff and what we are obligated, So I just wanted to have those two things in the atmosphere. We're required to follow this, and I also wanted you and others to hear that we are putting in effort to actually address the things that we're seeing on a daily basis. But I just didn't want it to appear that we aren't listening and there's nothing happening. We are by far more regulated than anywhere else, and we're doing more. And we also understand that it's going to actually cost the developers more when they're required to do it. Some are already doing it, and we're okay with that. So that's what I wanted to just put out there.
I appreciate that very much, Councilman Williams. And if I may just take 1 minute to respond to some of the things that were just brought up. Is that all right with the council members? And thank you for that input, Mr. O'Toole. I just wanted to address, this, again, I'm not just speaking as myself or, on behalf of community members. I'm working with a number of water quality specialists, including lawyers, who beg to differ with what Mr. O'Toole has said. It is a fact that if you are dumping sediment into a state waterway, a water of the state, that is above that state surface level standard directly from a development, that is a Clean Water Act violation. And we, this is my job, I report these to the Department of Environmental Quality all the time. So I would beg to differ on that piece. I also will say that my presentation was focusing specifically on the construction phase. I was not commenting on the stormwater phase whatsoever. I am familiar with green stormwater infrastructure and stormwater infrastructure. I just joined the Raleigh Stormwater Management Advisory Commission, and so I speak that language as well, and I was speaking specifically to the construction phase is what we're talking about. And when it comes to the construction phase, there are actually neighboring communities that have stronger regulations than us, including our neighbor Cary, who has a max of 30 acres of mass grading allowed at a time. I know that there is a very complex proposal in the works right now to address phased grading, and I would love to talk in more detail about, the math of that with city staff, because I really think that if you look at it, it does not result in much change on the ground. And the very last thing I would just address is that the very fact that there are amendments moving forward, the sediment erosion control amendment, the phase grading amendment, that shows that you all actually do have power. It isn't just, I have colleagues who sit on the state commission, the Sediment Erosion Control Commission. I understand how that works. You all do have power to update amendments specific to the Triassic Basin. And to clarify my ask for a pause, it's a pause on new annexations, on hearing those until we have those amendments in place, which hopefully isn't that long. So just to clarify those pieces.
Thank you, Councilmember Freeman.
Thank you. And I do believe that Mayor Pro Tem Middleton has questions as well.
Thank you, Councilmember. Thank you, Councilmember Williams. Thank you, Councilmember Freeman. Ms. Croft, thank you so much for being with us. I want to preface this by saying you were invited here by a council member, so my comments are not about you personally or about the good work of Sound Rivers. This is a highly unorthodox and I think borderline inappropriate presentation before this council. Since I've been on the council, I don't think I've ever seen an advocacy group given this type of platform before us to directly influence decisions that we will be making on behalf of the people of Durham. This is precedent setting, potentially precedent setting. This has been essentially an amicus brief for Preserve Rural Durham. That's what this has been de facto. And I won't even go to the substance because, and I think many of the things that you've pointed out to us are important, but one thing, there are a couple of things that are just very, very challenging to me because if we're going to do this for Sound Rivers, if a group comes along that doesn't agree with our LGBTQ protection ordinance, should they get a 30-minute time to present to us on that part of the issue and their to impact our votes? I've never ever sat through a presentation like this since I've been in elective office. This is clearly you're out of order. You're out of order. This is clearly aimed at skewing this deliberative body's decision process in one way. And if we give this, if we grant this to this, which is fine, and there are mechanisms to do that. I have emails in my inbox years long, folk that are aimed at doing that. But to elevate it to an actual presentation on our agenda, if we do it here, then we have to do it for everybody else that comes along, no matter how offensive the position may be, or no matter how intolerable it might be for us. In this presentation, we have been asked for a pause, which is another way of saying moratorium, which we have been told, which is a deliberate and blatant attempt to get this deliberative body to do something. And these presentations are usually information for us, and we have given back, but there were at least 4 or 5 things that we were admonished to do something, and what we're contemplating to do, it doesn't go far enough. This hasn't happened before. And if it has, find the tape and show it to me. This is unprecedented. And this does not go to the substance. Again, this is not about you because you were invited. This doesn't go to the substance of your presentation. I think many of the things in there, just substantively, are important. They're on the radar. We're addressing them. I do want to reiterate that because DEQ may have not done a comprehensive audit, does not mean that we're not speaking to them all the time and regularly, that we're not hearing from them regularly. So I want our residents and citizens listening not to interpret the last time a comprehensive report was done in 2009 means that we have not heard from them in 2009 or they haven't been issuing declarative since 2009. That is just simply not the case. And you're right, there may be lawyers with certain organizations, but lawyers are everywhere. Everybody's got a lawyer. And I stand with our lawyer that says that we have not violated the Clean Water Act. And if we have, I await the letter from a regulatory agency or a law enforcement agency telling us so. Sound Rivers is not a regulatory agency. It's not a law enforcement agency. Letters we've been getting from advocacy groups are not enforcement agencies. They are not regulatory agencies. They have our address, they have our names. I await either the subpoena or the letter from a regulatory agency and a law enforcement agency. But I just want to say, I really do appreciate you being here and the information, but this is unprecedented. And I would just say to my colleagues that if it's good enough for Sound Rivers, then it'll be good enough for the Proud Boys when they want to come and lecture us about something. I yield back.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, I believe, Madam Mayor. I did want to just note that I do believe DataWorks has done a similar number of presentations in the same manner around affordable housing, and there have been a number of other organizations that have as well. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I appreciate the comments. I just want to say that, to Mayor Pro Tem's point, at least with DataWorks and others, it was a called for conversation by the mayor, at least this is my memory and recollection, around a deep dive around affordable housing, and there was a process laid out. If this is what we're going to do, then I think there has to actually be a process. If I had known for the last 6 years that I could invite any advocacy organization to a work session to give 30-minute presentations, I would have invited them beforehand. So I think my ask here is for the Procedures Committee to meet, because that is the place that this conversation needs to happen, and come back and report back to council a potential, because in this case, it would just be a free-for-all. We could all do it, and we are asking staff to sit through, staff where we already have a 16% vacancy rate, to sit through presentations that we are asking for as individual council members with no process to it. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Councilmember Caballero. I was talking to Madam Mayor.
First of all, let me preface my comments with the fact that I am the one who issued the invitation to Ms. Cruz, and I am an unprecedented mayor. And the Tri-State Basin is unprecedented and unique soil. I do not consider it to be advocacy, brother, and everybody's entitled to their own opinion. That's why you have 7 of us up there. And I'm not in agreement with how it has been stated as perceived by other members of the council. I am not in the business of trying to advocate, but rather to educate. And information coming from different sources provides you with an opportunity to be educated or not. You can take the information with it, and you can do with it what you will. But what cannot happen is how you categorize advocacy and how I categorize information as being something that's unprecedented. Maybe in your terms, but not in my terms. And I think we can agree to differ. Now, if there's a way that we can come to an agreement on that, I'm fine with that. But I will not let it be said that whatever has happened is unprecedented and shouldn't happen before, because life every day is unprecedented. It's never happened before. So just because it has never happened before does not lend it to never happening before or again. So I thank you for your presentation. It is for information for the citizens of Durham City and Durham County and those listening to do with it what they will. Now, where you fall on it, if it's in agreement with your position or not, it's just that, your opinion. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Jose Hyman.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, thank you, Mayor O'Neill, for asking for this presentation to be brought before us. For me, it's educational. For me, I am able to take whatever information I get and be able to weed out some, get some, leave some, and make an informed decision. So for me, I like to be able to get all information. And I also want to say that when I hear the word precedent, what I am happy about being on this city council is that I'm hopefully being able to be a change agent and to be able to look at things from a different lens and not the way the lenses have been done, all right? Because Durham is moving and it's changing. And so I'm hoping that we are looking at things in a matter of being change agents. And the other thing that I'm very, very serious about is that we work for the residents. And I don't care if I agree, disagree, or whatever the case may be, a resident should be able to come up and give us information to make informed decisions. Like, again, you can take it, leave it, whatever. But I just have a problem with the way sometimes when people bring information to us, that sometimes I feel that it's landing on them, again, like we are putting them in on trial or we don't agree with them. We don't have to agree with you. But what we have to do is be able to listen. And so again, I'm going to say that I am hoping to be a change agent and change some things in terms of precedent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Jose Hyman. Are there any other comments? Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Councilmember Freeman. This is about the fourth or fifth time we've heard language about putting people on trial. We've heard people come in and borderline accuse council members of taking bribes and being in the pocket of developers. We've heard people stand before us and talk about people that live in townhomes. We've had people on this dais and in the audience suggest that we were deliberately doing harm and borderline poisoning people. Now, this is a democracy and this is a deliberative body, and this is also Durham. You don't get to just say things to grown people any old way. There's no context anywhere, where, not a courtroom, not a boardroom, where you can accuse somebody of being on the take. If you're grown enough to say it to another grown person, you should be grown enough to get it back. No one's being placed on trial. If you say that there's poison in this vial, and I don't ask you, how do you document it? That is malpractice as a decision maker not to ask that question. The only time we say people are being put on trial, it seems like, is when we don't agree with them. We are a deliberative body. Find me a tape where anyone's been called out of their name, where anyone's been disrespected, where anyone's been personally attacked, where we haven't just dealt with the issues, with the evidence. It is malpractice if you don't ask someone to prove it when they make a declaration. If you accuse someone of being on the take, you would darn well be prepared to back it up, particularly in a public setting. You absolutely have the right to come and speak before a council. You do not have the right to say things that go unchecked. It would not be a deliberative body if that were the case. So enough with these characterizations when it just doesn't cut your way or you don't agree with something. But you know, there's been no one on this dais that has had more names called at him, more eye rolling done, more suggestions made about anything. No one that's been more interrupted on this podium than I have over the years. Endured it all. But what I will not endure is folk coming and just making blatant accusations and then get mad when you ask them to show and prove. This is Durham. You make a statement like that, you're going to show and prove in Durham. And we can all respect each other. Nobody's been called names. No animals were harmed and no reputations were attacked in this answer that was just given. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions, just getting us back onto the actual presentation. And I just note, you mentioned that the math of the phases grading or the phase grading didn't add up. And I just wanted to dig a little deeper into that and ask what you thought might be helpful for our staff to review, or how, I guess, how you're coming to that analysis.
Thank you for that question. There are a couple provisions, or there's specifically one that was removed from the original draft to the second draft, which was vitally important in preserving trees. And that was a pretty wonky provision about double counting. Originally, the amendment included a provision that disallowed the double counting of already mandated buffers as this additional tree preservation area. That was removed in the second draft. And what that means is that the buffers that have always already been required, such as those 50-foot buffers around waterways, are essentially able to be double counted as this additionally required tree preservation area. And so if you do the math, what you can find is that in a lot of cases, something as simple as a riparian buffer with a little bit extra trees could actually meet this additional tree preservation requirement because of the allowance for double counting. That, to me, is a concern because it means that on the ground, when you lay it all out, which we have done in great detail, it doesn't end up necessarily looking like more trees on the ground. I think the other piece is that the amendment, while it incentivizes the retention of trees instead of replacement, it doesn't necessarily incentivize it enough to result in developers choosing that route. And so while it would be ideal for developers to retain the amount of trees that are required, it ends up looking like if they choose to replace them, we can still have these large clear-cut areas and they just have to be replanted, which the problem with sediment and erosion is land clearing, mass land clearing, and then that soil being exposed in a mass way. And so what we're going for is more trees left, not replaced. That's kind of like the technical distinction. And I could go into a lot more detail, and again, this new amendment has changed a great deal. The phase grading amendment has changed a great deal. And I've had an opportunity to dig into it in quite some depth, but would appreciate more opportunity to do so.
Thank you. And then just another question. When you're talking about the oxygen being depleted, just backing up, help me understand. The clay particles aren't sediment?
So I think that what's happening is that there's a distinction being made between suspended sediment and sediment that settles in the stream column, which is an important distinction, but I think, unfortunately, currently it's being used as sort of a way to evade responsibility for the suspended sediment. First of all, to say, even if it were true, which it is not, that this suspended sediment isn't settling, that is still a problem for water quality and for us. It's a problem for water treatment, it's a problem for water temperature, it's a problem for sunlight, it's a problem for oxygen. That's suspended sediment. But it also isn't true that it's not settling. You saw the pictures of the sediment coming down into Falls Lake, the aerials. I did not Photoshop those. I have stood in the creek with a macroinvertebrate specialist looking for the critters that determine whether a creek is viable as aquatic habitat. And we have stood in piles of sediment deposits and put a pole down 6 feet deep because it is mobile. This is mobilized sediment that is settling. It's not just sitting. Clay does take a long time to settle, and that's why we're here. But it does settle, and when it does, it lands on habitat, aquatic habitat, and that's where the Clean Water Act comes in.
Thank you. And just following up, so what you're saying is that the soil that's in the soil and the suspended clay particles and the sediment that's in the water is essentially making the water warmer. And that warmer water is creating an uninhabitable space for critters, as you stated, which would include fish or any other wildlife that would make the creek safe or healthy, so to speak. And so that harm that's being created, if it is prevented by trees being, I guess, essentially what I'm gathering is you're saying the trees, rather than being replaced, being kept in place. And if our language was to reflect the trees being kept in place, I'm trying to figure out where that would sit, and that's a question for staff. Thank you.
So I wanted to touch on a few things that Ms. Kopp has mentioned. One is the provision about double dipping is actually one that the original proposal was looking to take out. We did a little more digging, and riparian buffers, which is what the majority of the double dipping ends up being, by state law, we have to allow those to double count for tree preservation. That's by state law. Hence, we left that alone. So that is not something I think we can go back on. However, we have been looking at some other possibilities to incentivize larger stream buffers, because I think that is one of the best ways to prevent. The bigger buffers prevent things from getting into the stream itself, the longer kind of filtration distance. So that's one thing that we're looking at, but I wanted to clarify that because we can't take that off the table by state law. The other thing, I'm trying to remember, I lost my train of thought, oh no.
Before you go to that, when you say longer, are you talking about lengthwise or
wider?
Okay.
Yeah. What was the other thing that was mentioned?
It was preservation versus the retention versus replacement.
Yeah, so the ordinance already has a disincentive for replacement. You do have to preserve first. So now granted, if you have a site that's completely wooded, obviously you're going to have to clear in order to build. But the ordinance is set up to incentivize or disincentivize replacement. But that's one of the reasons why it's set up as a tiered system, so it kind of, the more that you either can't make because the trees just don't exist to begin with, which is an equity issue that's been brought up that we may also be looking at. But if you elect to, if your development plan has enough clearing where you are not going to have enough left to meet preservation, then it penalizes you, so to speak, by requiring more replacement. So that's built in. I understand some people may not be satisfied with the amount of disincentive that that gives, but that is the purpose behind why that's structured that way.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I also had a question on the, because I understand that Ms. Crop is not speaking specifically to the post-construction side, and so I did want to hear from Ms. Wolf on the, hold on, I made a note. On the stormwater rules and the tighter post-construction erosion controls. And in a specific manner, I would also like to ask, who, once the development is done, who's responsible for the cost on that stormwater erosion or stormwater, for the stormwater rules, for the erosion controls, and for a number of other water and sewer related concerns, if that makes sense?
Michelle Wolfolk with Public Works Department, and I have with me Paul Whipke, also with the Public Works Department. We're going to split your question. So after the development is done and the developers, the builders are gone, then the responsibility for making sure that the development is meeting state standards and keeping anything other than rainwater going into the storm drain is a responsibility of the city. So our city illicit discharge program will start to inspect. I don't know what happened. There we go. And respond to concerns raised by anybody about something going into the storm drain that's not stormwater. In terms of who's responsible for the stormwater control measures that are left in place at the development, it is usually the HOA that is responsible for that. But I will let Paul, did he disappear? Here he is.
Michelle is correct. In a residential subdivision, it will essentially be the homeowners association. That's turned over to them. Or in the case of a commercial development, it'll be, essentially it's the property owner who owns the property. They're responsible for the device. In the post-construction situation. Again, I'm Paul Whipke, Assistant Director of Public Works.
Thank you. And just following that.
And then just to separate it, sediment and erosion control is a construction-related activity that ends when the construction is completed and the site is considered stabilized. The device, sometimes they function as dual devices. Initially, during construction, that stormwater pond may have been a sediment basin.
And I guess just as a following that line of, okay, once you have the sediment base, well, once you have the
And the developer would be or the contractor would be responsible for the sediment basin at that time.
And just to be clear, the photo that I showed of the dewatering pipe was a sediment basin. So that's an S&EC measure, not a stormwater measure during construction.
Thank you. I appreciate that because that makes this a little bit more. So on the stormwater pond side, I really want to get to where the enforcement or whether there's any gaps in our enforcement, because if you're just reporting on the pre-construction side, that part we've handled, I feel like, with the measures we put in place and the more supports that we're giving to the county. But on the post-construction side, is there a need to make sure that there's not a overarching charge in place so that we're not missing, that the city's essentially carrying the entire cost?
Don O'Toole, City Attorney's Office. So sedimentation and erosion control, stormwater facilities that are part of a finished development, those are the obligation of the property owner. We have extensive rules in our city code In addition, we formally used what was called a stormwater facility agreement. Those get recorded at the Register of Deeds office. One of the things that, one of the obligations that that agreement places on the owner of the property, they have to have a professional engineer evaluate the stormwater facility every single year and turn in a report to the city to make sure that it is still functioning the way that it should be. There is a separate group within Public Works that handles those, and they look at those reports each year. First off, they make sure that they've received them, and then if there are deficiencies, they make sure that the property owner fixes all of the deficiencies. In addition, the code and those stormwater facility agreements require that certain financial securities are in place. So if the property owner didn't take care of the facility, theoretically the city could use that money to bring the facilities up to standard. And I don't know what the current status is, like whether we have facilities out of compliance, but I do know that we have a whole group of people in Public Works that address that particular issue. Obligation is on the property owner. They're supposed to inspect it annually, and if they don't, then Public Works staff follows up.
Thank you. And what I'm hearing is that overwhelmingly, we feel like we've got it managed on the post-construction side, and that all of those devices are working, all of those, like all of the elements that need to be in place to make sure that it's not coming from post-construction is not in place. It's only the pre-construction side that we have to be concerned about. And so what Ms. Kropp is bringing forward today is some alarming concerns around what's happening on pre-construction sites, and I mean, members of the community have also been bringing forward what's been happening on pre-construction sites. But I think that where I'm struggling is that rather than trying to figure out how to, I guess, line up to make sure that none of those particles are in the water, we're trying to figure out how to defend ourselves. I don't want it to become a fight. I'm trying to figure out, like, what other measures could be in place to make sure that our pre-construction side is not creating this harm in the waterways?
Ryan Eves, I'm with Division Manager for County Stormwater and Erosion Control. I think we are doing and have done a number of things to help with the construction site runoff control, the erosion control, land disturbance during construction. Monday night, you passed the text amendments for the Unified Development Ordinance that include the requirement for the use of flocculants. They include larger size sediment basins. They include increased detention times to try to help settle out some of those fine particles that we're talking about. What we are experiencing in Lake Creek, certainly turbidity, significant concern. We see the same things. Samantha and I have talked and a number of times, emailed and things like that. We express similar concerns about what's happening out there. Some of the questions are about what we can really and truly do about it during construction when considering the amount of development and these soils and the kinds of rain events that we are seeing. As Samantha showed you in the picture of that pipe with the water flowing out, like she said, that was a compliant site. That was, I can't say for sure it was fully in compliance at that time, but the measure itself was compliant. It was doing what it was supposed to do. If you looked upstream, if you took a picture of the sediment basin that pipe was coming out of, you'd see the water in that sediment basin is that same color. And that water and that sediment basin is designed to discharge that water after a certain amount of time. Unfortunately, and per state standards, per our current standards that we have extended of dewatering time 2 to 4 days. We're extending it to at least 4 days. Those particles, those fine soils, those triassic soils are not going to settle in 2 to 4 days. And so that's why that discharge looks like it does. We have had some compliance, sites out of there that get out of compliance. We have then brought them back into compliance. We do regular inspections. Our staff are out at least monthly to these sites. These sites in particular are getting hit even more often than that to make sure that they're maintaining compliance. They are also going above and beyond what they are required to do per their erosion control plans. And it is our job to make sure that their initial erosion control plans meet both the UDO standards and the state standards. Now, fortunately, we passed those UDO amendments Monday night. You passed them, the Board of Commissioners passed them last Monday night, and we're expanding. We are asking and requiring those sites to do more. I've had a number of conversations with, similar experts that I'm sure, maybe even some of the folks that Samantha's talked to. One of the best things that can be done to help settle these settlements is the use of flocculants. We're now Durham County, the city of Durham, are going to be the first program in the state to require the use of flocculants. Most of the other programs in the state, and us included up until now, have encouraged their use, but we'll be the first to actually require their usage. And so we feel we're taking steps. We are doing inspections. We are taking enforcement actions when necessary to help prevent what's going on. Unfortunately, just in the nature of the soils and the volume of development, it's going to take a lot of time to get those sites, get that stream back to where we all would really like to see it.
Thank you. So the volume of development, the nature of the soils, and there was one more piece that I didn't get to write down.
Particularly rain events. I mean, we see flashy flood events, we see heavy rain events that happen sometimes within a few days of each other. Those sediment basins can fill, and then they don't have time to dewater. If we get another big rain event, then they overtop. And so there's literally nothing that can happen or no time that can pass for any of those particles to settle.
So would that be a good reason to make the retention ponds bigger?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. And I think Councilmember Hosey Heisen.
Sorry, no, you answered the question that I wanted to ask about the pre-construction piece.
Okay. The mayor, and then Councilmember
I don't know whether someone has answered this before, but could you explain what are flocculants and how that works?
Yes. So flocculants are chemical additives to the water. They are biodegradable in most cases, but what they do is they cause those really small particles to stick together. And when they stick together, they get heavier. And when they get heavier, they start to fall out faster. That's what a flocculant is.
Councilmember Javier.
Thank you. Thank you for all the good information from staff. I think in general, we had a prior conversation around process, and this body really needs to be careful around process. I think residents very much expect, and we should rise to that challenge of following the processes that we lay out, and if they're not determined, then we need to create them. I just really want to thank staff. The entire time I've been on council, I was the former liaison to the UNRBA. I get water quality. I'm not an expert, but the thing that I have consistently heard for now in my 6th year is that what we do in Durham is top-notch. It's far and beyond what anyone else does in the state. Could it be better? Sure. I'm sure it could, clearly, because we unanimously passed ordinances. Quite frankly, in some of the most quickest time I've ever seen anything move in front of this body and in front of the county, based on residents who are clearly passionate about this. But at the end of the day, it's a small group of residents, and so I do, and I've mentioned this before. I've mentioned it at JCCPC where I sit. If we are going to respond in this way to this group of residents, when another group of residents show up with their very, very important concern that is relevant to their lives, but within the context of 300,000 people, you have to make those priorities, you do set precedent. We've responded, that's great, but then there's going to be another group of residents with their concern that I understand is deeply important to them, but I have to weigh out those priorities. I have to think about 300,000 residents. We had a gentleman here speaking about the condition of immigrants. We are doing what we can around that. There's infinitely more what we can do. And these are folks who don't speak our language, who are often put on a plane. They've come from Afghanistan or Ukraine. The amount that the challenges that they have to deal with is something, quite frankly, very few of us on this dais have ever had to experience. So I'm saying all that so that we understand that when we are an elected body, we have to think about everyone and we have to think about everyone's priorities. I'm glad that we passed those amendments. I'm glad that we asked the state. But they could have also said no. They could have said, no, that's the requirement. We're comfortable with it. We're not sure how this is going to play out elsewhere. Question, you know. So I'm sharing all of this because I want folks to understand the context around how we make these decisions. And I also just want to really appreciate staff because I know you all work hard. I think part of the difficulty is that some of this lives in the county and some of this lives in the city. And I think it's hard for folks, including ourselves, to negotiate where. I had a real quick question. I was hearing that there was a presentation made in front of county commissioners around low impact, basically stormwater, like not doing stormwater ponds, but using natural, like ditches and other kind of, I'm like losing the word here, but it was really interesting. It was not the way we do it now, and I was curious if we could get maybe some information about that because I think it's potentially another tool besides just requiring these ponds, which is kind of how we do it now.
Right. So I'm the division manager for stormwater and erosion control for the county. So we were, on Monday, we did a presentation. We are updating our county stormwater ordinance. So for the unincorporated part or unincorporated area of the county. And a lot of what we did was reorganization, clarity. One of the things that we included and are trying to encourage is the use of green stormwater infrastructure. We are only able to go so far because of state legislation that does not allow us necessarily to go beyond the state. But we included runoff volume match as a method that developers can use to meet their runoff and nutrient requirements. I can't speak to what the city's ordinance says with regards to runoff volume match, but I know it's allowable, and I feel confident they have something similar. So I think we were just trying to highlight it to encourage the use of green infrastructure, even though we can't necessarily require it.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you, Councilmember Caballero.
Hi, thank you.
Our performance standard, or we have performance standards. How the developer chooses to meet them is entirely up to them.
Is there a way, and this is probably more of a planning question, and maybe we can bring it up at JCCPC because I'm looking at the time, to have just a little bit more updates, because at least from my point, as a council member, when I'm looking at these, I'm
I can tell you green infrastructure is very expensive to do in Durham, and it's very much related to Triassic Basin soil.
Okay, thank you.
The soil that's there doesn't.
Hard to deal with.
You have to put something else in.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Caballero. And I would say thank you to Samantha Kropp.
Thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you. I did have another question for staff. Is there a scheduled cumulative impact study coming up anytime soon?
Michelle Woolfolk with Public Works again. I'll get closer to the mic this time. Maybe it won't turn off. So what the city has been doing for a number of years is doing watershed implementation plans. And the last one that we have scheduled actually will deal with Lick Creek, Stirrup Iron Creek, which is more through RTP, and Briar Creek, which is a very, very small amount of Briar Creek in Durham County and Durham City. So that plan is the next plan. I think that our schedule is to start that within about a year or two. We're kind of hampered right now by staff vacancies, so we can't quite get it going, but it is our plan to do that one.
Is it possible to do it with a contracted organization?
We always do those with contracts.
Okay, just making sure. Thank you. And I do believe Councilmember Williams.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, staff, for helping to interpret this complex information for us. And thank you, residents, for always persisting. I just never want the ultimate reality to be void of the conversation. The more things we require, the more expensive it is. And these are the tough choices that we have to make. We are, and this is a necessary evil. We are going to require more for the sake of the water quality. And with that, you know, it is going to probably cost more to build. But these are the decisions that we have to make in order to allow, you know, development to still happen, which I will say I will not support taking a pause, but I will support the aggressive measures that we're taking moving forward. And I also wanted to just state that all of you all, your concern, I respect. I really, really, really do. I may not agree with, you know, well, it's not my place to agree with your concern. It is my place to respect your concern, and I ask that you respect my consideration for it. And that's just how, you know, deliberation goes. So I appreciate you all for persistently coming here and stating it. I hope that you will be open. I know this gets a bit contentious sometimes, and it gets contentious amongst us as council members, but I do hope that you see that we're trying to make an effort with the representation of your concerns, but also the representation of those who are not here, those who don't have the luxury of being here, and also those who are going to have to, you know, be on the receiving end of these new mandates. It is extremely complex. So thank you. Thank you for expressing it. Thank you, staff, for helping us to make the most informed decisions. And it's complex. It's called democracy. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Williams. I did want to just take a moment and thank our expert from the News Riverkeeper for joining us today and sharing this wonderful presentation, to at least make sure that we're all aware of the information and that staff is definitely looking at it. I appreciate that their responses I hear quite often. They're talking with you already, so that's helpful. And I do appreciate staff being ready and willing to answer all of the questions. So I'll turn it over back to the mayor.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman Freeman. Do you have something? I did want to also express my gratitude to staff. Every time Ms. Wilford gets up there and says some things, I always learn something, all of them. For me coming in as a new mayor, and that's why I want to clarify something, everything doesn't have to have a bone of contention when it comes to dealing with tough issues. There is a process in democracy, I think, for you to have advocacy, and it can rub, right? But my role as mayor is to try to make sure that if I'm feeling overwhelmed by the amount of information, to not take for granted that I'm the only one. And so when I came into this position, when you start talking about water quality and those issues, I knew absolutely nothing about that area. And very quickly, we were having to make decisions around development. And very quickly, rural Durham came in, some of the members whom I have known for a while, saying, hey, there's an issue. Well, I know nothing about Ellerby Creek, knew nothing about Ellerby Creek, the tributaries, and all of those different things. That's not my area of expertise. But what I am an expert is in trying to get understanding. And understanding requires listening to all manner of experts, whether I agree with it or not. The more I listen, the more I understand. So now I have probably I'm in kindergarten still, I feel like. But there are others here on the council who have had years of experience listening to these issues, and they have a wealth of knowledge that I hope that we can learn from each other. But there is a lag between a person who has been a learning curve from a person who's been on the council a very short time to people who have been here longer. And so when trying to ascertain what that learning curve is, we've had the benefit of listening to our staff who are very smart. They are experts in this area. And they have, and I do believe that we are still in compliance, as they have stated. And we see that in other areas that we have to deal with, where we're following all of the state regs, but we also feel that there are some areas that we can be more involved in, gun violence, all of those places where nonprofits come in and talk about their area expertise and how we build out a picture using our staff. I don't think that's an unusual circumstance, and I hope it would never be an unusual circumstance when people in the public who are experts in this arena, in nonprofits organizations, can come in and say, well, we may beg to differ with what you come up with. We don't agree with that, or we think you can get better. That is democracy at its best, and that shouldn't have a bite to it. It should be where we are able to have these conversations in order to help those of us who are newer to figure out all of this stuff. When Ms. Krupp came in and she presented, her information on just the water basin itself and all of the stuff that she went into, I felt that my other council members, even the ones who have been here longer, could find some benefit of that. It wasn't to agree or disagree with one group of citizens over another, because even when you look at, I'm sitting here like, okay, what's the difference between nonprofits who come in and talk to us about violent prevention measures for gun violence and Ms. Krupp who came in to talk about preventive measures that she think may address water quality. It's all learning from each other, and then you take that information and you vote how you want. That's what you were elected to do. So I take issue with those who say that this is unprecedented. If it is, it should be, because there should be a process by which information is disseminated in the public atmosphere, and that's the way it's going to be as long as I feel like I'm in kindergarten and I'm being asked to make these decisions on these very hard issues. I'm going to get the information that comes to me from these experts. They said they are 42 years in as an organization. The city, our experts have been here in this area for just as long. I value both of those opinions. And it's up to us to figure out how we weigh that in your own individual mind and you cast your vote. But what I will not do is not have information that comes to me that I think may be helpful in our learning curve to be stifled. And you don't have to agree with that. That's just the way I roll.
So I also want to say thank you so much for our presentation, and thank you to staff, because I don't want it to be that you think that I don't, number one, value your work and your hard work and your dedication to us trying to improve all aspects of Durham. But as I think all of us do, all of us do it, but I also try to meet with the people coming in from the community. And Mr. Adam Clerk came in and met with me last week, and he talked about just the issues of these young kids that are refugees, immigrants, in terms of education, which is something dear to me. And I said, come and talk to us. Because I don't know if the rest of my council knows. I know some people on this council do, because that's just maybe their expertise. So I'm going to continue, no matter who I speak to, I'm going to ask them to come and speak in public comments. Because that also educates all of us in areas that maybe we are not savvy in. I'm savvy in that area because, again, I'm a social worker, but when he talked to me about the level of the number of people who are moving here, who are immigrants, who are refugees, who don't have certain basic needs, that's a problem for me. And so I asked him to come and speak. So I'm going to continue to do that. Thank you.
All right, thank you all for a lively conversation this afternoon. We thank Ms. Krupp. We thank our staff for being here and for us always learning something. And hopefully, I know that we all have the best interests of Durham at large, and so we're getting there. At least we're talking about it, and we're going to have some action behind it. I look forward to a smaller discussion at the end of, after we settle our agenda, about the process around SCAD. So please kind of think in your minds how we should try to direct that public hearing so that we can have time for more people to address it. So we will now turn to our boards and commissions from our clerk.
Good afternoon, everyone. I will start the report with the Cultural Advisory Board appointment. The council has nominated Margaret E. McNabb for that position. The Durham Planning Commission appointment, there was not unanimity on that. We have a three-way tie, or not a tie, but a three-way imbalance between Vikas Gurram, who's received 2 votes, Sarah Oliver, 3 votes, and Matthew Kopak, 1 vote.
Madam Clerk, I'll change my vote from Matt Kopak to
Vikas Gurram?
Vikas Gurram.
Okay, then there are 3 votes for Vikas Gurram. Would someone who has nominated Sarah Oliver want to change their vote? Would you like to know the breakdown? Okay, if you don't want to switch, we have a tie with Vikas Gurram with 3 votes, as well as Sarah Oliver with 3 votes.
Madam Clerk, if no one wants to change their vote, then we'll have to remand the matter until Councilmember Johnson gets back.
Okay, do you want to carry it to the council meeting, or do you want to hold it to another work session?
I'll defer.
Let's put it to another work session. I think she'll be back.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Fine.
Moving on, the Housing Appeals Board nomination for the category of at-large alternate member is Malika Langley. For the Durham Workers' Rights Commission appointment, you've nominated Idris Foxworth, Krista Kenny, Laura Serratos, and Danae Willis. And for the final item, Durham Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission appointment, representing North Carolina Central University Liaison is Jalen R. Baker. And that's the end of my report.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We will now turn to our city manager to settle our agenda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One of the agenda items is the public hearing that is scheduled. So I am going to need some guidance prior to settling the agenda, or asking that it be settled.
Okay. Let us revisit the SCAD. It is set for public hearing on the 20th of March. I have had a brief conversation with Councilman Williams and also Councilwoman Jose Harmon, the 3 newest, and we would like some for it to be broken down a little bit further for easier reading. I'm going to ask the 2 of them to kind of speak to what they would like to see in terms of what would make it easier for them to be able to understand where we're going. And then further from our more senior members, how in fact we can, is it better to have a meeting, a special meeting just to deal with that so that we can give the opportunity for both sides to kind of weigh in? I know you heard our residents say that they have a desire to have an hour of time. Then, of course, we have to make sure that both sides have the equal amount of time. Just some ideas of how we can accommodate those requests along with the requests of your fellow council persons.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. What I was hoping for, I believe Director Young has already done. When I read the initial document, it was before the Planning Commission had a set committee to break it down, and it was extremely technical, so I was hoping that it could be broken down into parts, something more digestible for me as a non-development expert, and I believe Director Young has had that done. So only request I have at this point is I may have questions further based on the breakdown that you've already done. And in regards to just having a special meeting to go through it, I'm okay with that. But what I do want to be cautious of, I don't want the full representation of the city to be reduced to just a few people. I do want us to have a fair deliberation around it. And, you know, and also I'm not interested in having an up or down vote for the entire set of amendments. I'd like to go through it and make a choice on each one that we can possibly do based on the breakdown that's already been done. But I just want to be cautious of, you know, community engagement is very important. It's also easy for some to hijack, and I know that that's happened in a sense. Thank you.
So for me, I know while you might have done that, I might need to just have maybe a one-on-one just because it's, you know, I'm reading it and a lot of it is just stuff that I'm not familiar with. And so I want to be able to be more informed to be able to make a better decision in the voting. So I would like for us, and I don't know if this can happen, for us to be able to do like individual meetings, but everybody maybe not need that, but I know I do, so, yeah.
I know for me, what would be helpful if I know, you know, when we're talking about the actual breakdown, if we know the opinions of our planning staff and the opinion of our planning commission, I guess, and whoever else on the city side, what their opinions are from our attorney staff, just to get a feel for where, because, you know, some of the comments that we are hearing is that, as Councilman Williams has stated, there's some that folk are in agreement and some that are not, I guess. And so it would be helpful if you all could weigh in as to your opinions in light of your expertise on those issues so we can kind of figure out where folk are in agreement and where we stand as a city.
Yeah, we'd be happy to do that. We can repackage amend the memo a little bit to more closely kind of follow the parts outline and have a little analysis that kind of lets you know where staff is and a link to any pertinent, I think we can probably easily do this, a link to the corresponding kind of planning commission comments. Sometimes it's a little more challenging with those because they talk about all sorts of things in like one single paragraph, so you may, you know, there may be some repeat things there. But let us see what we can do to help make that more digestible. I will also be having a follow-up meeting with the applicant team because, as you know, as a privately initiated amendment, this responsibility falls on them to really make their presentation and make sure that people understand what they are proposing. So we will be meeting with them. Staff will provide them guidance on procedural stuff, and we will give you all our analysis and kind of pain points or recommendations since as you've asked. But we will be putting the onus on the applicants since it's their proposal.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Just a note, I'm not sure if the Environmental Affairs Board's comments have been included as well, but I do know that they set up a subcommittee around this as a presentation was made to the Environmental Affairs Board.
I don't think we've received official comments from EAB, but I'll follow up with them just to double check. So thank you for mentioning that.
So back to the actual layout of what that looks like in terms of a meeting. Is that a special meeting that allows for both the applicants and, you know, whatever community voices that are going to be heard? What does that look like?
So I'll be asking for help, but, you know, certainly I'm always thinking about, you know, the public hearing. We've had special meetings just for, you know, public hearing cases. And at the end, regardless of how long that would be, you know, most likely you would vote if it's a true public hearing. We could have, as Councilmember Williams has stated, anyone who wanted to have extensive conversation about it could have that conversation. It just, you wouldn't want to embed it in a meeting where you had, you know, 6 or 7 public hearings. That is one way of, there's nothing to prevent us from having a public hearing for one case.
Council colleagues, any suggestions in that?
Yeah,
Either one. I think the ladies go first, though.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I guess I was just seeking clarification if we are discussing moving the public hearing from March 20th to another date. I will say there are 7 public hearings. I did actually ask if that has, I don't think that's ever happened since I've been on council. We've never had 7. I just want to note that. And one of them is for the budget, and I don't want to curtail public comment around the budget. And I've already, because there's 7 public hearings and the work session agenda was short today, I've already been combing through everything. None of those zoning cases are particularly straightforward. So my joke was already like, are we going to get pizza at midnight? So if the idea,
We will be here.
So I guess my question is that what we're taking, is that what we're considering is to move the public hearing from March 20th to another date?
I am open to that. I'm open to that.
Okay, and then the next question I have are around but then we would vote on that night. It's not an informational session, it's a public hearing. I just want to make sure that, because it seemed like the folks who were making public comment today wanted some kind of separate meeting, and I was kind of unclear. Okay.
I say this with all due respect. Any contentious policy that comes before us, it always gets a lot of, feedback. I do think, and I don't want to get into precedents or anything like that, but I do think that, sometimes we find ourselves relitigating elections on development cases or others. I don't want to devalue the concern of the community, because I've personally been informed by some of the things that they've actually gone through. One point was I reinterpreted based on a communication with one of them. But I also don't want to isolate a few representatives or a few people to place level. We're going to have a special meeting with a few folks who may have a concern, and then us, and then the applicant. I don't think that would be fair, to the applicant. I don't think it'll be fair to not even the applicant, more so the process that we practice. So I want us to do our job as taking the concern from the residents and considering that when we're hearing and going through this ourselves. But there have been some folks that have stated publicly, I'm against this and I haven't read it. And they have been some of the biggest champions against it. And then there are some folks that are like, you know what, I think, this will be good for me, and they haven't read it, and they've been the biggest cheerleader for it. So I just want to make sure we're steering clear of, just bringing anyone into a level time frame on discussing this. I think it's up to us, the applicant, the staff, and there's been a year of some sort of community engagement. So I just wanted to state that. Freeman.
Councilwoman Freeman.
Thank you. I did want to share some of my bias as the former president of the Interneighborhood Council, just acknowledging that this is a unique group of folks in our community who are usually homeowner associations, neighborhoods, and unorganized neighborhoods, folks who come together on a regular basis, monthly, to talk about issues around zoning and issues around developments. It has often been contentious. That's how I ended up in this room, coming for hearings based on the Interneighborhood Council, representing the Interneighborhood Council. And I will say that it does raise serious concerns that we're not hearing from such a vibrant organization in our community that is fully volunteers. If they've created a full subcommittee and they've had that many meetings and broke down and created a report, it feels like unjust and not hearing out, I guess, whatever they're trying to present or share. I would want to make sure that we understood fully as a council what our neighboring communities were talking about without us in the room. So I think it might be really beneficial to have some of that conversation in the room with us, with the applicant and with staff. It's not the same as just a resident who hasn't read it. It's very different. I think she said 22 meetings. That's a lot.
Yeah, it's been 22 meetings, and also some of the members of the group also said they haven't engaged in this at all. I want to be really careful on, so I've participated with the INC, and this is not about INC, this is more so for me about process. There are over 300,000 people in this city, and I've been in some of the meetings with INC, and I've heard what happens in the meetings, and there's a lot of good, and there's some things that are not so good. I don't want to, and what I'm saying in regards of our practice as a council, that's not the only representative group. So what I'm saying, we've gone through a process where, you know, there are representatives that put us in these seats, and we have a job to do. We have also capacity for public input, but to specify a specific time and a specific capacity for only a certain group, I'm not in favor of that. So that's what I'm getting. I'm not devaluing that. I respect everything that's happening there, and I appreciate it, because those are volunteer community members that are actually engaging in this process. But I don't want to treat any one group special over any other group. That's what I'm getting at.
And I can appreciate that, but when we talk about equitable, it is essentially like acknowledging that there are differences, and those differences usually encompass, like the people who are mostly directly impacted are going to be at the forefront of those conversations. They're going to be pushing the hardest. So the reason you see the people that in this room is usually because they're advocating on their own behalf. That's usually the case. And as a representative on this body, I've always, if it were 330,000 people that wanted to speak to me about an issue, I would listen individually. That's fine. But as a collective group, when they make it simpler for you to hear from over 30 neighborhoods, I think it's beneficial for us to hear it. That's all. I'm just stating how I feel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, colleagues, for this great conversation. So let me say, first, I'm in favor of anything that, you know, my honorable colleagues think will be helpful in informing a vote and making us more informed. I do think that if on any given work session in city council cycle, there are literally hundreds of pages that were sent by the staff to read on any given week. And I try to read them. I try and read everything that the staff sends before I cast a vote. You know, when I read the SCAD amendment, and I did read it, it was technical, but at least in my read, it was no more technical than the development plans that are part of our package as well. If you read a full development plan and look at those graphs and maps, they get pretty detailed, and a lot of the language is the same language that we've experienced in development plans. With that said, it was one of the more, I think expanded housing choices was kind of voluminous as well, but with that said, it was one of the more voluminous text amendments that I read. I think if we're going to have another public hearing, that it's important that the city council translates and trumpets to the public that the city council, because we need more time to digest this voluminous amendment, is changing a public hearing. I think that telegraphing that, and with all due respect, INC is a great organization. One of the best debates when we were running, I think, was held by INC, Councilmember Freeman, when we first ran for office. But they are one organization. And I think that Durham Can is listening. And we've all been in front of those, yes-no meetings. And they would love nothing. I mean, if we say that an organization can change the date of a public hearing, there's a PA is listening. Durham Committee on the Affairs of Black People are listening. So I think that it's important that if we're going to change the public hearing, that it's because we as counselors need more time and bandwidth to educate ourselves and to digest this voluminous text amendment. If we're doing it because one particular organization said, we want an hour, and we lionize them as the representative of the 300,000 folk, however many people try and reach out to us, then again, I think that there are a number of organizations who limit themselves when they want to, advocate before us. They come and fill out cards, and they say, I represent such and such organization. They get 3 minutes, like everybody else. If we do this, I think that, and colleagues, if we think we need it, then we should do it. But I think it should be because we need to study this more so than because a particular organization said, we're the voice, we want an hour. Because, again, if there are plenty of organizations in this city that could do more than an hour or two. I used to lead one of them, and I know they'd like nothing more than to, bring us all in a room for an hour and keep us there as the representative. And they represent thousands of people too, and thousands of voices in the city as well. So whatever the body, needs in terms of digesting this, I fully support. But I think we ought to be careful in our packaging of why we're moving a public hearing that's already been scheduled. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you all. I think from my vantage point, the way that I have tried to view what is going on in that space is that you have and it's, like I said, it doesn't have to be it's not a bite. Developers are very much a part of our community. They help us grow. So it's differing opinions. So you have a developer who's presented some proposed changes in ordinances, which I assume that's the law that's gonna govern how development is done, about 80 pages of it. And we have citizens on the other side, both citizens, who have said they have differing opinions. In the middle, we also have our planning department, who are the experts, who will be in charge in making sure that whatever we pass at this level is carried out. So when you're asking for changes, and I think our, Ms. Young has said that this is, once again, this is unprecedented. We've really not had this type of text amendments, omnibus given to us like this. Once again, I go back to let us make sure that we understand what is being asked of us. And for folk who've been here longer, you read them. They after a while, it becomes kind of rote because you read them. But for those of us who are still new, I'm still learning. And I'm still very much conscious that when I hear words like that, this is something different. This is something new, and it's coming in packaged different. And I'm not clear on what we're doing regularly, then we coming in with something new, there's a disconnect. First thing I'm always gonna do is talk with the two who came in with me or after me to see if they're feeling the same. And so after talking with these two who came in the same time I do, we all share that we need to make sure that we're comprehending what we're being asked and also the differing views that are out there so that we can make sense of it for ourselves and have an informed vote. Nothing more, none less. Doesn't have anything to do with one group of citizens coming in here, whether they be black, green, or purple, whatever their opinion is. It is understanding simply the lay of the land, having clarity in your own consciousness so that you can vote with your best foot forward. Plain and simple, nothing more than that. So I am asking that we consider that we consider a special meeting for us to allow our planning department to give us their expertise. You know, they're sort of the neutral party in this. They come in and they give us their best expertise on what the varying community members, be it the applicant or the ones who are in for or against what the applicant is proposing, they're sort of the stabilizer for me. So I want to hear how they are viewing what we're being asked on both sides. That's important for me. To know how they are viewing these asks of us. So that's my reason for asking for us to have the opportunity for them to make those adjustments. Also, the format of making sure that the applicant, as well as different voices, whether it's coming to INC or just your regular citizens coming on, whoever wants to come and have I don't anticipate a 6-hour meeting, but I do think that we have to have some time for discourse, for people to discuss what they're going to hear. And some of them may be repetitive from those who have come in today. Nothing more, nothing less. I don't think that has to be, you know, debated or up or down. Just do we want to have a special meeting or not? Allow for them to do that and open a public hearing. Whoever comes, let them come and speak like we normally do.
Point of clarity.
Madam Mayor, thank you for that so much, I think, for a path forward. I wonder, do you think, ma'am, it would be helpful if, based upon the reading that each council member has already done, if they would maybe just in advance forward their questions and concerns to the Planning Commission? That might help head off a 6-hour meeting. If they're very responsive when we ask questions of the staff. If you have some specific areas you did not understand based upon your initial reading of the text amendment, and give staff kind of time, so when we do get to the meeting, a lot of that work won't have to be done publicly and, you know, in large meeting contexts, as we always do if we have questions or we don't understand something. I have no shame sending staff an email saying, would you please explain this? I don't know if that might be helpful in terms of taking some time off the big meeting.
Yeah, I would support. I think that's pretty much what I need, just a few questions answered. I wouldn't mind deliberating it with you guys. I'll be open to a special meeting, but I would like to do that before the 20th. I don't really want to, it's the sacrifice. If we're asking for it, then it's going to be a sacrifice of scheduling if we're going to do it. So I would support it under those conditions. I will reach out with my questions or whatever, but I mean, we have a public hearing that's the space for the community members to address it. Because if we do a special meeting and then we make that a public hearing, and then we also have a public hearing, that's a lot. Yep.
Okay, I'm really confused. I'm sorry. To me, a special meeting isn't necessarily a public hearing. A public hearing is a public hearing. So I just want to understand, Mayor, when you're saying a special meeting, you're not saying outside what you're suggesting we do is just move the public hearing that is scheduled on the 20th to a date later so that folks have more time? Yes. Okay. I'm fine with that, but I'm also not the applicant. Partly just because I already stated there's 7 cases that night. I remember when expanding housing choice, I think ROMF was one of the other ones when we had the ROMF. I mean, we were here until 1 in the morning and that was one. And I don't remember there being many other public hearings on expanding housing choice night. I feel like that was the only one we heard that night. And we were still here till midnight. So for practical purposes, for our own sanity, I am completely open to moving the public hearing and only having that one public hearing, because we're going to be here for 5 hours just for that one.
That was my confusion. I was not supporting 2 separate meetings on this one thing.
No, what I'm saying is that based on what the mayor has indicated, that she's not asking for a special, she's not asking for like what we did with the Planning Commission last week, right?
Okay.
Standalone informative sessions. She's just saying, and please correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you got it.
She's just saying, for everyone's benefit, because it is dense material, could we move the public hearing to a later date and it be the only thing we hear that night? So that way, everyone has enough time to have public comment and the community members who want to come out can, and we're not compressing anything.
Thank you so much. See, that's
I'm in planning
seniority
department.
right there.
As long as it's not 2 meetings.
That's seniority.
Can I? So I did at the very end when we said move it to a meeting when we don't have any public hearings already scheduled. I don't think there's a meeting like that. So it would have to, if you all wanted it to be a night when there's only one public hearing, it would have to be an extra meeting. Would that be correct, Sarah and Carmisha? I don't think we have.
Yeah, right now we have public hearings, at least, I think on average 4, sometimes 5 public hearings programmed out, probably 2 months into the future. So it's either kind of a special meeting or just knowing that we're going to tell applicants that everyone's going to get bumped a cycle down the road to clear a night. Madam Manager, I think that's what you wanted me to clarify. Yeah.
And I just want to clarify for everybody's benefit, and I think Councilmember Caballero was on to it. So a special meeting is just a meeting that you all officially hold that deviates from your official calendar. So you have regular council meetings, you have regular work sessions. if you all choose to do business, and that can be public hearing business, it can be informational sessions, it can be whatever you like, but it's something that's not on your published calendar.
Okay, so we are agreeing to have a public hearing for this item only. Is that a thumbs up? Go ahead.
Sorry, well, to the Attorney Rayberg's point, I think there's two questions. If it's its own, either we're pushing everything off the April 3rd meeting, right? Because if we're, I'm just trying to understand this. Either we're bumping everyone and this gets moved to the next council meeting, or we do have to have a special meeting. Am I correct? Because it's not in the typical order that we take council business.
So I'm looking at our internal calendar, and I think we could do it on April 17th. We only had one for sure public hearing and one general business item that night. I can make sure that the one public hearing was going to be a small text amendment. We could do that. That's a staff-initiated thing. We can move that to another night, and we can just tell applicants that night is off the limits. So I think we could do that if that is amenable to you all, April 17th.
Just point of information, I'm scheduled to be out of the country, but you'll still have quorum. So I just letting y'all know.
Now, that's up to you if you want to be here. Don't stop. We're waiting for you to call, Mayor Pro Tem.
Oh,
I can
I'm
ask him.
sorry, ma'am.
We can wait. I prefer to have all 7 of us for something this important.
I agree.
I mean, I would love to be. I wouldn't dare be so presumptuous to ask you to wait for me, but if you, I mean, I'd be more than happy.
We need all 7.
Thank you, ma'am.
We need all 7. We need everybody that can be here, and so I don't want to schedule it when we know it's not going to be here.
Looking ahead, could we do May 1st? Or are there other, because that's far enough ahead, I can move a couple things around. I don't know what other public hearings from other departments may already be programmed for that day. That's more of a Carmisha probably question, but.
And I want to be real conscious that we already have Councilwoman Johnson out today. So can we ask you to just set a date based on with our staff and folk, not to include Mayor Pro Tem's date, and just so that we won't set something and we figure out that Councilwoman Johnson may not be here on that date? Is that possible, that we could wait until she returns, so that I would really like all 7 of us to be here, if at all possible?
So I think from a procedural standpoint, since the public hearing for the 20th has already been advertised, you would either need to, on the 20th, refer it back to staff if we're still working out details, or if we're able to have suggested a date that works by then, on the 20th, you open the public hearing and continue it to that date.
That sounds perfect.
Okay, we'll work on that.
Okay. So we'll put it back. So it'll stay there, and then we'll figure out a date on the 20th. Okay. All right. Okay. Does that answer all the questions? We ready to settle the agenda now?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Mayor. For your consent agenda, I have items 1 and items 3 through 13. GBA public hearings, items 16 through 22.
All right. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right, that's been moved by Councilwoman Freeman, seconded by Councilwoman Jose Hyman. All those in favor, if you sign by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed have the same right. Hearing none, we have settled our agenda. Thank you all for a lively discussion today. You know, even though it gets kind of like, that's a part of democracy at work. All of us come in for what? Bull City Strong. We are all adjourned for 6 p.m. Thank you, thank you. We did great.
Madam Clerk, you need these cards back?